There is a man whose skin is the color of ash. Not pale, not sick. Ash. The fine gray dust that's left when something you loved has finished burning. He didn't paint it on. He didn't choose it. It was burned into him as a punishment, fused to his flesh so that every time he looked at his own hands, he would remember exactly what he did to get them that color. Most people carry their worst moments somewhere private, buried where the light can't reach it. This man wears his everywhere he goes. He is, quite literally, dressed in the remains of the people he killed. And here is the part that should stop you cold. He spent the better part of 300 years trying to wash it off. He climbed mountains for it. He murdered gods for it. He tore the sky open and drowned the world in the blood of his own family's executioners, all to feel clean for one single morning. And it never worked. Not once. Because the thing he was trying to escape wasn't on his skin. It was underneath it. This is the story of a weapon that wanted to become a man. It's the story of someone who was handed to the gods as a child, sharpened by them like a blade, pointed at everything they hated, and then thrown away the moment he became too dangerous to hold. It's the story of a father who failed so completely, so monstrously, that the word father should have been forbidden to him forever, and who would, against every law of decency and every prophecy ever written, somehow be given the chance to be one again. And it's a long story, longer than almost any single life has the right to be. Because this is a man who does not get to die when his story should end. He outlives his enemies. He outlives his friends. He outlives his gods, twice, and stands in the ashes of 2 entire mythologies, the last one left who remembers them. Over the next stretch of time we're about to walk through together, you will watch him be a slave and a king, a murderer and a savior, the destroyer of one world and the protector of another. You will watch him commit atrocities that should make him irredeemable, and then you will watch him spend centuries earning a redemption no one believed was possible, least of all him. If you only know him as the bald, screaming, blood-soaked engine of rage from the old stories, the one who tears gods apart with his bare hands, then you know maybe a third of him. You know the wound. You don't yet know what the wound became. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That redemption is hundreds of years and several dead pantheons away. Right now, before the gods, before the ash, before the rage that would become legend across 2 mythologies, there is only a boy in a place that did not believe children were allowed to be soft. So let's go back. Let's go all the way back. Back to where the weapon was first forged, not by a god, but by a city. His name was Kratos, and he was born in Sparta. Now, if you know anything about Sparta, you already understand part of him. This was not a place. It was a furnace built to produce one product, and that product was killing. Children were taken from their mothers and handed to the state. Weakness was inspected for at birth, and, if found, corrected by abandonment on a cold hillside. Pain was a curriculum. Mercy was a flaw you trained out of a person the way you'd file a burr off the edge of a sword. A Spartan boy was not raised. He was tempered. And it's worth slowing down here, because this is the soil everything else grows out of. And if you skip past it, you'll misunderstand the man for the next 300 years of his life. A Spartan child wasn't taught that violence was sometimes necessary. He was taught that violence was the only thing that was real. Kindness was a trick. Trust was an opening your enemy hadn't exploited yet. The boys were deliberately underfed so they'd learn to steal to survive. And then beaten, not for stealing, but for being caught. Because the lesson was never about right and wrong. It was about competence. About never showing the soft underside of yourself to a world that would gut you for it. You can spend years in therapy unlearning a single childhood like that. Kratos never had a single quiet hour to unlearn anything. So picture what that does to a person. By the time he's old enough to understand the word, he already believes in his bones that to be loved is to be in danger, because anything you love is a lever someone can use against you. He believes that the strong take and the weak are taken from, and there is no third option, no mercy that isn't just weakness wearing a nicer face. This is the operating system the gods will later exploit so perfectly. They didn't have to corrupt Kratos. Sparta delivered him to them pre-corrupted, a blade already forged, just waiting for a hand cruel enough to swing it. Every monstrous thing he'll do partly because somewhere a city decided that the way to keep its children safe was to make sure none of them could feel anything that might slow their sword arm. And into the harshest, most unforgiving machine the ancient world ever built, Kratos was born with one thing the machine could not account for: a brother. His name was Deimos. And whatever Sparta tried to carve out of these two boys, it could not carve out the bond between them. Kratos was the older one, the bigger one, the protector. Deimos was the one he swore he'd never let anything happen to. In a world that taught him affection was a liability, this single relationship was the one place Kratos let himself be something other than hard. They trained together, they fought together, they made each other a promise, the way only children can make promises, completely, with no understanding of how cheap the universe holds them. And then one day, the sky split open over Sparta, and the gods came down to take one of them away. Here's what was happening, although neither boy could have known it. Far above, on Olympus, the gods lived in constant fear of a single prophecy. It said that one day, a warrior, a mortal one, marked in a specific way, would rise up and bring about the destruction of Olympus itself. The gods, being gods, were not interested in justice or in understanding. They were interested in eliminating threats. And so Ares, the god of war, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, descended on Sparta, hunting for a child who bore strange markings on his skin. That child was Deimos. Soldiers of the divine seized him, and Kratos, young, terrified, but already exactly who he would always be, did the only thing his nature would ever let him do. He attacked. He threw himself at a god to save his little brother, fists against the storm, a child swinging at the architects of the universe. It went about as well as you'd expect. Ares struck him down. And to make sure the boy never forgot his place, the god of war dragged a blade across Kratos' face, opening a wound from his brow down through his eye that would scar over into a single red slash he'd carry for the rest of his unnaturally long life. The mark of the day the gods proved to him exactly how much his love was worth to them. Nothing. Less than nothing. And then they were gone. The sky closed, and Deimos was simply not there anymore. Sit with that for a second, because everything, the entire blood-soaked legend that follows, grows from this exact wound. A boy tried to protect the one person he loved, and the most powerful beings in existence took that person, scarred him for trying, and left him kneeling in the dirt with a face full of blood and a hole in his chest that would never close. What does a child do with that? He learns. He learns the lessons Sparta and the gods are teaching him in the same brutal afternoon. He learns that love makes you weak, that weakness gets you punished, that the only thing the universe respects is force. And he decides, in whatever way a traumatized child decides anything, that he will never be powerless again. Not ever. So he grows. And he becomes very, very good at the one thing his world rewards. By the time Kratos reaches adulthood, he is no longer a frightened boy swinging at the heavens. He is a Spartan general, and he is magnificent at it. He's the kind of commander that armies build legends around while he's still alive to hear them. Ruthless, Brilliant, utterly without hesitation. He marches across the known world, conquering city after city, his army swelling behind him, his name spreading ahead of him like a sickness. Whatever ache lives in him from that day in his childhood, he has found a way to convert it into fuel. Every battle he wins is, in some quiet part of him, a message sent upward. Look what I've become. Look how strong. You should have feared me. You should have feared us. And for a while, the strategy works. Power answers the call of his ambition the way it always answers the powerful. He takes more. He becomes more. There seems to be no limit to how far this engine of conquest can carry him. But pay attention to what's actually happening underneath the victories, because Kratos himself can't see it, and it will define the rest of his existence. He is not conquering for land. He is not conquering for Sparta's glory. Not really, whatever banners he flies. He is conquering because the only minutes of his life that don't hurt are the minutes he's fighting. Battle is the one place loud enough to drown out the silence where his brother used to be. So he doesn't stop when the strategic objective is met. He doesn't stop when the enemy is broken. He keeps pushing, keeps expanding the war, because the moment the killing ends, the ache comes back, and the ache is unbearable. He has discovered the addict's logic without knowing the word for it, that the cure and the poison are the same substance, and that you have to keep increasing the dose. A man like that doesn't have a breaking point so much as a horizon, and he's racing toward it the whole time, pretending it's strength. But ambition has a way of marching a man straight off the edge of his own competence. It happens on a battlefield against the barbarians of the East. Kratos has overreached, finally bitten off more than even he can chew, and his army is being slaughtered around him. These barbarians are not like the soft cities he's been crushing. They're winning. His soldiers are dying in heaps. And then their leader, the barbarian king, closes in on Kratos himself. And for the first time since he was a child kneeling in his brother's empty space, Kratos is staring directly at his own death. He's beaten. His weapons are useless. The king raises his weapon to end the legend right there in the mud. And Kratos, who learned as a boy that the universe only respects force, does the most human thing a desperate man can do. He prays. Not to a kind god, not to a gentle one. He calls out to the only god whose name means anything to a man drowning in blood. He cries out to Ares. Yes, that Ares. The same god of war who took his brother and scarred his face, though Kratos has no idea the connection. And he offers him everything. Destroy my enemies, he begs, and my life is yours. And the god of war, who has been watching this furious, broken, perfect little weapon his whole life, smiles. Because Ares has been waiting for exactly this moment. Think about the patience of it, the long cruelty. Ares didn't stumble onto Kratos by chance on that battlefield. He had marked him years before, on the day he scarred a boy's face and stole his brother. He had watched Sparta and grief and ambition do his work for him, watched the weapon sharpen itself, and he had simply waited for the moment the blade would beg to be picked up. Gods don't rush. They have nothing but time, and they spend it the way a patient predator spends a long afternoon, letting the prey exhaust itself before closing the distance. The prayer Kratos thinks is his own desperate idea is the last move in a game Ares started before Kratos was old enough to shave. The sky darkens. The god of war descends a second time into Kratos' life, and this time, instead of taking, he gives. He saves Kratos. He annihilates the barbarian horde in an instant. And then he offers his new servant a gift, a pair of weapons forged in the fires of the underworld itself. Twin blades, chained, meant to be wielded like extensions of the body, swung on lengths of chain that wrap around the forearms and let a man cut down a dozen enemies in a single arc. The blades of chaos. But there's a catch, the way there is always a catch when a god gives a mortal a present. To bind the blades to their new owner, Ares fuses the chains directly into Kratos' flesh. The metal seared into the skin of his forearms, melting bone deep, branding him permanently. From this moment on, Kratos cannot put the weapons down. He cannot set them aside. They are part of him now.
The scars where the chains entered his arms will never heal, and they will burn, faintly, forever. A constant low reminder that he sold something to get this power, and that the bill has not yet come due. And in that moment, kneeling on a battlefield with new weapons grafted into his bleeding arms, Kratos feels something he has chased since the day his brother vanished into the sky. Invincibility. He thinks he has finally won. He thinks he has finally become the thing that can never be hurt again. He has no idea, none, that he has just handed himself to the exact same god who broke him as a child, that he is about to be transformed into an instrument of suffering so complete that it will end with him standing over the bodies of the only people he has left to love. But that's the cruelty of the bargain, isn't it? The day Kratos felt strongest is the day he became someone else's weapon. And weapons don't get to choose what they're pointed at. For a time, Kratos becomes the most loyal servant the god of war has ever owned. He raids, he burns, he slaughters in Ares' name across the Aegean. And he tells himself it's worship, that he's repaying a debt, that this is simply what strength is for. The blades of chaos sing in his hands. Villages empty before him. And somewhere far above, Ares watches his investment grow, pleased, but not yet satisfied. Because Ares doesn't want a great warrior. The world is full of great warriors. What Ares wants is the perfect warrior, a weapon with no weakness at all. And there is exactly one weakness left in Kratos. One soft place the furnace of Sparta never managed to burn out of him. Because somewhere in all of this conquest, Kratos went home, and he built a life. He had a wife. Her name was Lysandra, and she loved him in the way that frightened him, not for his strength, but in spite of it. She watched him grow colder and crueler with every campaign, and she begged him again and again to stop, to come back, to remember that there was a man somewhere underneath the general. And they had a daughter, a little girl named Calliope, small and bright and entirely innocent of everything her father had done in the dark. For all his ferocity, Kratos loved them, genuinely, helplessly. They were the one part of his life that had nothing to do with the gods or the killing, the one thing that was just his. Which is precisely why Ares decided they had to go. The god of war devised something almost unspeakable in its cruelty. He guided Kratos and his army to a village, an ordinary village, in the dead of night, lit only by torches and the red haze of battle rage that Ares had learned to stir in his servant like a fever. Inside that village stood a temple, and Ares, working in the shadows, made sure that Kratos' wife and daughter were inside it. Then he let his weapon off the chain. Kratos stormed the temple in a blind frenzy, blades flashing, cutting down everyone who moved in the dark. He was a storm with no eyes. He was exactly the thing Ares had spent years building. And in that storm, in that howling red blindness, two figures stepped into his path. He didn't see their faces. He only saw obstacles. And he killed them. By the time the rage cleared from his eyes, by the time the temple went quiet and the torchlight steadied, Kratos was standing over two bodies, and he looked down. It was Lysandra. It was Calliope. His wife and his daughter, cut down by his own hands, by the very blades the god of war had given him, in a frenzy the god of war had engineered. There is no recovering from a moment like that. There is no after that is the same as the before. In a single instant, Kratos lost everything that made him a person,
and gained everything that would make him a legend. And those were the same thing. He fell to his knees in the blood of the only two people he had left to love, and he understood, all at once, with horrible clarity, exactly what he had done, and exactly who had made him do it. And here is the cruelest mechanism of the whole tragedy, the thing that makes it more than just a terrible accident. Ares didn't simply trick Kratos into the killing. He had spent years building the exact instrument that made it possible. The red battle rage, the blindness, the willingness to cut down anything that moved in the dark. Every campaign of slaughter, every village burned in the god's name had been training for this one moment. Kratos murdered his family using skills Ares gave him, in a frenzy Ares cultivated, with blades Ares fused to his arms. The god didn't just want them dead. He wanted Kratos to be the one who did it, because a warrior who has killed his own wife and child has nothing left to protect. Nothing left to lose, nothing left to be, except a weapon. Ares wasn't removing Kratos' weakness. He was performing surgery on his soul, cutting out the last human part of him and calling the wound perfection. And it worked exactly as designed, except that the rage Ares unleashed would, in the end, have nowhere to go but back up at the gods who made it. The temple's oracle, an old woman who had watched the whole horror unfold, stepped forward, and she gave Kratos a curse that would define the rest of his existence. She took the ashes of his murdered wife and daughter, the ashes from their burned bodies, and she fused them to his skin, forever. From that night onward, Kratos' flesh would be the pale, lifeless gray of the dead he had made. He would never be able to wash it away. He would carry the physical remains of his family on his own body until the day he died. A walking grave, a living tombstone. And there's a terrible mercy hidden inside that curse, though it would take Kratos lifetimes to find it. The oracle could have done 100 crueler things. She could have struck him blind, or mad, or mute. Instead, she made his punishment a kind of permanent intimacy. She ensured that the people he killed would never leave him, that he would carry Lysandra and Calliope on his skin every day for the rest of his endless life. It was meant as torment, and for 300 years, that's all it was. But it also meant that Kratos could never quite become the empty weapon Ares wanted, because the proof that he had once loved something was fused to his own body, impossible to ignore, impossible to wash off. The curse that branded him a monster was also the thing that kept the man underneath from disappearing entirely. The dead he carried were the last evidence that he had ever been capable of carrying anyone at all. The Spartans had a name for what he became. They called him the Ghost of Sparta. The pale specter, the ash-skinned monster, the man who had murdered his own family and could never escape the proof of it. And here is where the real torture begins. Because killing Lysandra and Calliope did not just break Kratos' heart, it broke his sleep. From that night forward, every time he closed his eyes, the nightmare returned. The temple, the torches, the bodies, his own hands. Over and over and over, every single night, for years. The gods had given him a body that could not die easily and a mind that could not rest at all. He was sentenced to relive the worst thing he had ever done in perfect detail forever. So he made a decision that tells you everything about how he thinks. He went to the gods. Not for forgiveness. Kratos has never once in his life asked for forgiveness, not from anyone. He went to them for a transaction. He offered the gods of Olympus his service. He would be their executioner, their problem solver,
their attack dog. And in exchange, they would do one thing for him. They would take away the nightmares. They would erase the visions of what he'd done. They would let him sleep. And the gods, of course, agreed. Because a weapon that powerful, that desperate, that completely owned by its own guilt, that's the most useful thing an immortal could possibly possess. They didn't tell him the truth, naturally. They had no intention of relieving his suffering. They simply understood that a man chasing peace will do anything you ask of him, forever, as long as you keep peace dangling just out of reach. And so begins 10 years of servitude. 10 years of Kratos hurling himself at every monster, every threat, every impossible task the Olympians could devise. Each one promising to be the labor that finally earns him relief. None of them ever delivering it. He becomes the most feared mortal alive. He descends into the underworld and back. He battles creatures that would unmake an ordinary army. And through all of it, the nightmares never stop. Each morning he wakes with the same ash on his skin and the same dead faces behind his eyes. And each morning, the gods point him at one more task. And he goes, because what else is there? And here's the detail that makes those 10 years genuinely a kind of hell. The thing that separates Kratos' suffering from ordinary human grief. Ordinary grief, however terrible, has an end built into it. You mourn, the years pass, the wound scars over, and eventually you die and it stops. Time is cruel, but time is also merciful. It carries everything away in the end, including you. Kratos has had that mercy taken from him. The blades fused to his arms came bundled with something he didn't ask for and couldn't refuse. A body that simply will not quit. He can be run through, burned, drowned, crushed, dragged into the land of the dead itself, and he keeps coming back, keeps waking up, keeps carrying the same memories into the same sunrise. For most beings, forever is an abstraction. For Kratos, it became a sentence. The gods didn't just refuse to lift his nightmares. They engineered a creature that could not even use the oldest escape hatch every other sufferer is eventually granted. He is condemned to remember his wife and daughter in full color every night, with no horizon on which that might ever stop being true. So understand what those 10 years really cost him, beneath the spectacle of the monsters in the underworld. They cost him hope in the only form he could recognize it, the hope of an ending. He wasn't fighting to build a future. He had no future he wanted. He was fighting because each labor was sold to him as the last one, the one that would finally buy back his sleep. And he needed to believe that badly enough to keep getting up. The gods understood this perfectly. They had found the single most efficient way to own a person. Not chains, not threats, but a promise they never intended to keep, refreshed daily, dangled exactly far enough ahead that he'd march off any cliff to reach it. Every one more task was a lie, and he half knew it was a lie. And he went anyway, because the alternative was to sit still inside his own skull. And his own skull was the one battlefield he could never win on. But during these 10 years, something happens that reveals the man underneath the monster more clearly than any battle ever could. The sun goes out. The god of dreams, Morpheus, takes advantage of a moment of divine weakness, and the entire world begins to fall into a deathless sleep, drowned in darkness as the sun itself is stolen from the sky. And Kratos is sent to fix it, to find the sun, to hold back the encroaching nothingness. His journey takes him into the depths of the world, where he confronts Persephone, the queen of the underworld, who has her own plan to end all existence and finally be free of her grief. And Persephone, who understands suffering, offers Kratos something the gods never would. She offers him his daughter. She shows him a path into Elysium, the resting place of the blessed dead, where Calliope waits, whole, peaceful, untouched by what her father did. Persephone tells him he can stay,
He can put down the blades, give up his godlike strength, surrender the very power he sold his soul for, and spend eternity with his little girl in paradise. All he has to do is let the world end. Let the sun stay dark. Let everyone else fall into the endless sleep while he holds his daughter's hand in the light of Elysium forever. And for a moment, a long, agonizing moment, Kratos says yes. He embraces Calliope. He gives up his power. He chooses her. After everything, after all the blood, the one thing he wants is the thing he can never have. And here it is, offered freely, and he takes it. And then he sees the destruction beginning around them. He realizes that staying with Calliope means letting the world die, means letting countless other fathers lose countless other daughters. And Kratos, the murderer, the monster, the ghost of Sparta, makes a choice so quietly heroic that it's almost unbearable. He lets her go. He turns away from his own daughter, reclaims his power and his curse and his nightmares, and he saves a world that has only ever used him. He chooses everyone else's children over his own, and he walks back out into a life of suffering that he could have ended, because he could not bear to buy his peace with someone else's grief. That's the contradiction that lives at the very center of this man, and we will see it again and again. He is capable of monstrous things, and he is capable of this: the same hands. And it's worth pausing on that choice in Elysium, because it's the single clearest window into who Kratos is underneath all the rage, and you should hold it in your mind for the rest of this story. Everything about Kratos' life had taught him to take. Sparta taught him the strong take from the weak. Ares taught him to take cities, take lives, take whatever power he could seize. Every god he ever dealt with operated on the logic of the transaction, the grab, the advantage pressed. And here offered the one thing he had wanted more than his own existence: his daughter, alive, in paradise, in his arms, with the only price being other people's children he would never meet. Kratos refused to take it. He chose strangers over his own heart. He chose a world full of fathers he'd never know over the one reunion he'd have torn the heavens apart for. Nobody made him. No prophecy demanded it. He simply could not buy his own happiness with someone else's grief, because he knew, better than anyone alive, exactly what that grief felt like. The man the gods built to be a weapon had, buried under all that ash, a conscience so stubborn it would walk away from heaven rather than let another family break. That's the seed of everything he eventually becomes. It was always in there. It just took 300 more years for the rest of him to catch up to it. But the universe was not done taking his family from him. Not even close. Because around this same stretch of his long servitude, Kratos learned something that cracked open the oldest wound he had. The one from his childhood, the one that started all of it. His brother Deimos was alive. All those years he had assumed Deimos was dead, taken by the gods and destroyed. But the truth was worse, and somehow more enraging. Deimos hadn't been killed. He'd been imprisoned. The god of death, Thanatos, had been holding him captive in a place called the Domain of Death for Kratos' entire life, torturing him, breaking him, century after century. All because of that ancient prophecy about the marked warrior who would topple Olympus. When Kratos learned this, every other consideration burned away. The gods, the sun, the nightmares, none of it mattered. His little brother, the one person he had sworn as a child to protect, the one he had failed so completely, was still out there, suffering, and had been the whole time. so Kratos went to free him. But here is the brutal thing about saving someone too late. The Deimos that Kratos finally reached was not the little brother from his memory. The years of imprisonment and torture had twisted him into something hardened and furious. And when Kratos broke his chains and stood before him, expecting what? Gratitude? A reunion? Deimos looked at his brother with nothing but rage. Because in Deimos' eyes, Kratos hadn't saved him. Kratos had abandoned him. For a lifetime. He had grown strong and famous and feared while his brother rotted in the dark. And only now, only when it was convenient, had he finally come. Deimos attacked him. His own brother, the one he'd crossed worlds to rescue, turned on him in blind resentment. And Kratos, this is the part that hurts. Kratos let him. He didn't fight back the way he could have. He took the blows from a brother who hated him because some part of him believed he deserved them. And then Thanatos arrived to reclaim his prisoner, and the brothers, finally, fought side by side, the way they were always meant to. But it didn't last. In the battle against the god of death, Thanatos turned his fury on Kratos, and Deimos, the brother who had every reason to let him die, threw himself in the way. Deimos was struck down protecting the very man he had spent a lifetime hating, and he died in front of Kratos, the second member of his family to die within arm's reach of him, the second person he had failed to save. And there is something almost too cruel about the timing of it, the specific shape of this loss. Kratos didn't get to save his brother. He didn't get the reunion he'd crossed worlds for. What he got was a few moments of being hated by the person he loved most, followed by watching that person die for him anyway. Deimos' last act in existence, a sacrifice for a brother he'd spent a lifetime resenting. So Kratos doesn't even get the clean grief of a brother lost. He gets grief tangled up with guilt, tangled up with the unbearable knowledge that Deimos forgave him at the very end, in the only language a Spartan knows, by stepping into the killing blow. Whatever apology Kratos might have offered, whatever years they might have rebuilt, all of it died in that instant, leaving only the debt, the certainty that his brother gave his life for him, and he never got the chance to earn it. Kratos went berserk. He killed Thanatos. He avenged his brother. But vengeance is not the same as rescue, and he knew it. He buried Deimos with his own hands, and he took the markings, the very tattoos that had condemned his brother, and had them applied to his own body, a great red design across his torso, so that he would carry his brother the way he already carried his wife and daughter, as a wound he would never let heal. Think about what that act of tattooing really is, because it's the key to the whole man. Kratos didn't memorialize his brother with a monument or a song or a quiet grave he could visit. He had his brother's condemnation carved into his own flesh. He took the mark that got Deimos taken, tortured, and killed, and made it permanent on his own skin. A deliberate, irreversible choice to wear his failures rather than to set them down. It's the same impulse that lets him keep walking around in the ash of his murdered family for 300 years. Kratos does not believe he has the right to be unburdened. Some part of him decided long ago that the only honest way to live with what he's done is to never let his body forget it for a single second. He turns himself into a monument to his own losses, a walking record of everyone he failed. And it will be 3 centuries before anyone teaches him that carrying the dead and punishing yourself with them are not the same thing. Look at the pattern now, because Kratos certainly could. Everyone he had ever loved was dead, and his hands were somewhere in every single death. His brother, taken because Kratos couldn't protect him as a child, and lost again because he reached him too late. His wife and daughter, slaughtered by his own blades. He was a man who destroyed what he loved simply by loving it. And the gods, the ones who had orchestrated almost all of it, kept smiling down at him, kept dangling peace, kept pointing him at the next task. He was beginning to understand, slowly. The fog of his own guilt was beginning to lift just enough for him to see who had really been holding the chains this whole time. And when Kratos finally turned that understanding into purpose, the gods of Olympus would learn what it costs to forge a weapon, and then forget that weapons can be turned around. By now you might be wondering when Kratos finally gets his revenge on the god who started all of this. On Ares, the one who took his brother, scarred his face, gifted him the blades, and tricked him into butchering his own family. And the answer is, when the gods themselves hand him the knife. Because Ares, it turns out, had grown ambitious. The god of war decided he no longer wanted to be one Olympian among many. He set his sights on the city of Athens, the jewel of the goddess Athena, and he laid siege to it with a fury that threatened to consume the entire mortal world. This was not allowed. The gods may scheme against each other in the shadows, but open war between them spills over onto everything below. Athena needed Ares stopped, and she could not raise her hand against her own brother directly. So she went looking for someone who could, and she found a man already drowning in hatred for the god of war, a man with nothing left to lose, a man who had been begging the heavens for years to take away his pain. Athena made Kratos an offer: kill Ares, and the gods will forgive your sins. They will erase the nightmares. They will finally give you the peace you've been chasing for a decade. All you have to do is the one thing you already want to do more than breathing: destroy the god of war. Of course he said yes. He'd have said yes to anything that ended the dreams. But notice the shape of it, because it's the same shape as everything. A god using Kratos' grief as a lever, pointing him at exactly what he wants and calling it a favor. But killing Ares was not a simple matter of will. Ares was a full Olympian, and Kratos, for all his power, was still mortal. To stand any chance, he needed a weapon capable of killing a god. He needed Pandora's box. What follows is the labor that would have broken anyone else. The box was hidden inside a temple, an enormous, impossible temple, chained to the back of a titan named Kronos, who wandered the endless desert as eternal punishment for his own ancient crimes. To reach the box, Kratos had to climb the titan himself, scaling a living mountain of suffering flesh across days of brutal ascent, solving the temple's lethal puzzles, surviving its traps and its guardians. And he did it. Of course he did it. Pain is the one language Kratos was always fluent in. But the gods are nothing if not consistent in their cruelty. The moment Kratos claimed Pandora's box, Ares, watching from afar, fully aware of what his old servant was attempting, reached down and struck him dead. A pillar through the chest. Just like that. Kratos was killed, his soul dragged down toward the underworld, the box left behind. And he climbed back out. From the very edge of Hades, hanging over the abyss, Kratos refused. He clawed his way up out of death itself, out of the underworld, back into the living world, driven by a hatred so total that even death couldn't hold it. He recovered the box, he opened it, and the power inside. Power meant to make a mortal capable of slaying a god, flooded into him and transformed him into a giant, into something that could finally stand against Ares as an equal. The battle that followed leveled what was left of Athens. Two titans of violence, the student and the god who made him, tearing at each other across a ruined city. And Ares, desperate, reached one more time into the deepest wound he could find. He conjured an illusion, a vision of Lysandra and Calliope alive again. And he made Kratos relive their deaths, hoping to break him the way he'd broken him before. But something had changed in Kratos. The thing that Ares had used to control him for so long, the guilt, the grief, had finally curdled into something the god of war could no longer steer. Kratos found the blade of the gods, an enormous sword left behind in the ruins, and he drove it through Ares with every ounce of the rage that Ares himself had cultivated. He killed the god of war. He killed the architect of his entire ruined life. And there's a bitter poetry in how that final illusion failed, because it tells you something about what Kratos had become and what he would spend the next 300 years failing to escape. Ares tried to break him by showing him Lysandra and Calliope alive, by reaching for the soft place, the way he always had, the way he'd been reaching since he first marked a boy in Sparta. It had worked every time before. Grief was the leash. But somewhere in the climb through death, the grief had fused with the rage so completely that they were no longer separable. And what Ares thought was a weakness he could pull on had become the very engine that was about to kill him. Ares had spent years sharpening Kratos into the perfect weapon, and the final, fatal irony was that the weapon was too perfect. He had made his servant into something that could no longer be steered by the same hand that built it. Every cruelty Ares used to control Kratos was, in the end, a lesson in how to stop being controlled. The god died at the hands of exactly the monster he'd designed, undone by his own craftsmanship. And notice what killing Ares does and doesn't do, because the whole rest of the Greek saga lives in that gap. It satisfies the vengeance. It does not touch the wound. Kratos had spent his every waking moment believing that if he could just destroy the god who tricked him into murdering his family, something inside him would finally be set right. And he stands over the corpse, the deed done, the great enemy dead. And the temple is still burning behind his eyes. The dead are still dead. The ash is still on his skin. He has just learned, without yet understanding it, the lesson that will take him 2 pantheons and 3 centuries to truly absorb. That vengeance is a door you keep expecting to open onto peace, and it only ever opens onto another empty room. And here is the moment the whole story pivots on. Here is where you understand that the gods were never, ever going to keep their word. Kratos, standing over the corpse of his greatest enemy, finally turned to Athena and the others and demanded what he'd been promised. The forgiveness, the peace, the end of the nightmares. And the gods told him the truth they had been hiding all along. They forgave his sins, yes. That part they honored. But the nightmares? The memories of his wife and daughter dying by his hand? Those, they said, they could never take away. No god could. A man's deeds follow him. The visions would remain. He had murdered the god of war for them, climbed through death and back, and his reward was that he would suffer exactly as much as before, forever. And Kratos, in that moment, did something that no one in any legend ever expects from the unkillable monster. He walked to the edge of the highest cliff in Greece, and he threw himself off it. He chose to end it. After everything, the conquest, the bargains, the dead family, the slain god, the great ghost of Sparta decided that an eternity of this was not worth living, and he stepped off the edge of the world to drown himself in the Aegean Sea. He didn't get to. Athena caught him. She pulled him back from his own death because the gods were not finished using him. With Ares gone, Olympus had a vacancy, a throne with no one on it. And who better to fill the seat of the god of war than the mortal who had just proven he could kill one? They didn't save Kratos out of mercy. They saved him because they had one more use for him. They raised him up. They made him a god. The murderer, the ash-skinned ghost, the broken Spartan, was given a seat on Olympus and the title of the new god of war. And it changed nothing. That's the cruelest twist of all. Kratos got everything the world tells you to want: power, immortality, a place among the gods themselves. And the nightmares still came every single night.
He sat on his throne, worshipped and feared, and behind his eyes the temple still burned, and his family still died, over and over, in perfect detail.
And this is the moment the whole Greek saga has been quietly arguing toward, so it's worth saying plainly. Kratos' entire existence up to this point has been built on a single unspoken belief. The belief Sparta taught him, that Ares confirmed, that every god reinforced, that if you just become strong enough, you can outrun your pain, that power is the answer to suffering. He climbed the whole ladder. He became a general, then a legend, then the slayer of a god, then a god himself, the literal god of war on a throne on Olympus. He reached the very top of the only system of value he'd ever been given. And from the summit, he could finally see the thing that had been true the whole climb, that there is no amount of strength that fills a grief, that power and peace have nothing to do with each other, that he had spent his life answering the wrong question with increasing force. The throne didn't fail to heal him because it wasn't a big enough throne. It failed because thrones don't heal anyone. He just had to become a god to learn it. You can give a man the whole sky, and it will not fill the hole where his daughter used to be. So Kratos became a god, and he spent the years that followed exactly the way you'd expect a man with infinite power and infinite grief to spend them. He went to war. He led the armies of Sparta across the world, conquering in his own name now, drowning the silence between nightmares in the noise of battle. He became, by any measure, a tyrant, a god who used mortal soldiers like kindling, who cared about nothing except the next conquest, because the conquest was the only thing that kept the dreams at bay. And up on Olympus, the other gods began to watch their newest member with growing unease, because there was that old prophecy, the one that had haunted them for so long, the prophecy of the marked warrior who would bring about the destruction of Olympus. They had spent generations trying to prevent it. They had taken Deimos, tortured him, killed him, all to stop it. And it slowly began to dawn on them that they had been looking at the wrong brother the entire time. One god in particular could not shake the dread, the king of Olympus himself, the lord of the sky, the father of gods and men, Zeus. And Zeus, like every powerful being who has ever felt the ground shift beneath him, decided he would rather destroy the threat than understand it. He had taught Kratos, by the cruelest example imaginable, exactly what fathers do to the children they fear. He just hadn't told Kratos yet that he was one. The trap that Zeus laid for his own son was a masterpiece of betrayal, and it began with a gift. Kratos, leading his Spartan army into yet another siege, the city of Rhodes this time, found his conquest interrupted by a sudden mysterious force. A giant eagle swept down and stripped away a portion of his godly power, draining it from him in front of his own soldiers, leaving him weakened in the middle of battle. Humiliated, furious, suddenly mortal feeling for the first time in years, Kratos struggled against an enemy he couldn't even see. And then a sword fell from the sky. The blade of Olympus, the very weapon the gods themselves had used eons ago to end the great war against the Titans, the most powerful blade in all of creation. A voice from above urged Kratos to take it, to pour the rest of his godly power into it, to make himself strong enough to win. So he did. Desperate to save his army and his pride, Kratos channeled every last drop of his divinity into the blade of Olympus. He emptied himself of godhood to fill the sword. And the instant he did, the instant he made himself mortal again, the trap snapped shut. The eagle revealed itself. It was Zeus, in disguise, who had stripped his power in the first place. And now Zeus stood before a drained, weakened Kratos, picked up the blade of Olympus, and ran his own son through with it. Zeus killed him, demanded loyalty, was refused, and drove the blade home. As Kratos lay dying, Zeus told him this was the only way. that Olympus would not be brought down by Kratos' hands, that the cycle of sons destroying fathers had to be broken before it began. And then the king of the gods left his son to bleed out and sink into the underworld a second time. But you should know by now, death has never once been able to keep this man. As Kratos was dragged down toward Hades, sinking into the abyss, a voice reached him from the deepest, oldest part of the world. It was Gaia, the great mother of the Titans, the primordial beings the gods had overthrown and imprisoned countless ages ago. The Titans had been waiting, nursing their hatred of Zeus across eternity, and they recognized in Kratos a perfect instrument of the revenge they could not take themselves. Gaia pulled him back from death. She offered him a path. Travel to the Sisters of Fate, she told him, the three beings who control the threads of destiny itself, who decide what is and what must be, and use their power to go back to the moment of your betrayal and kill Zeus before he kills you. And just like that, Kratos had a new purpose, and it was the purest, hottest thing he had ever felt. Not duty, not a bargain. Not the god's errand disguised as a favor. This was his. This was personal. Zeus had taken his power, his army, his life, and added himself to the long list of fathers and gods who had betrayed Kratos. And Kratos was going to climb all the way up the throat of destiny and make him answer for it. The journey to the Sisters of Fate is a descent into the strangest, most dangerous corners of the Greek world. Kratos crosses paths with the dead and the doomed. He encounters other figures the gods have used and discarded, mirrors of his own fate. He meets the Titan Prometheus, chained and tortured for the crime of giving fire to mankind. And in one of the rare moments where Kratos' cruelty bends toward mercy, he grants Prometheus the death the God King denied him, freeing him from eternal torment. Kratos knows something about being kept alive specifically so that you can keep suffering. He recognizes a kindred prison when he sees one. And here, in his rage against Zeus, you can start to see how completely Kratos has become the thing the gods feared. He is no longer fighting to earn peace, or to free his brother, or to save the world. He is fighting because he has been wronged, and he intends to make the entire established order of the universe pay for it. The grief that Ares once used to control him has hardened into something else, a furnace of vengeance that asks no permission and recognizes no authority. The marked warrior who would bring down Olympus. They made him with their own hands, and now he was coming for them. He reaches the Sisters of Fate after battles that would have ended 100 lesser legends. He confronts the beings who weave destiny itself, who insist that what has been written cannot be unwritten, that even gods must bow to fate. And Kratos does the most Kratos thing imaginable. He kills them. He murders fate. He decides that destiny is just one more thing standing between him and Zeus, and he tears it apart with his bare hands and seizes control of the loom of time itself. With the power of the sisters in his grip, Kratos pulls himself back through time, back to the exact moment of his betrayal at Rhodes, back to the instant Zeus drove the blade of Olympus through his chest. And this time, he's ready. He intercepts his own death. He confronts Zeus directly, the king of the gods, in a battle that shakes the heavens. And for a moment, it seems like the simple, satisfying story is about to come true. The wronged son strikes down the treacherous father. Vengeance achieved. The end. And it's worth marking what Kratos had to do to even arrive at this moment, because it tells you something the rest of the saga keeps proving. To reach Zeus, he had to defeat the Sisters of Fate, the three beings who hold the threads of every life and decide what has been written and what cannot be unwritten. They told him, as fate always tells everyone, that his story was already decided, that no being could escape what was woven for them, that even the gods themselves bowed to destiny. And Kratos' answer was to kill them, to physically destroy the concept of fate and seize the loom for himself. Most heroes in most myths spend their lives trying to fulfill or outrun a prophecy. Kratos walked up to the machinery of prophecy and tore it apart with his hands. And in doing so, he made the single most important claim of his entire existence, long before he understood it. That no one, not gods, not fate itself, gets to decide in advance what a life will mean. He won't grasp the weight of that act for 300 more years, but he commits it here, in rage, almost by accident. The man who will eventually change a painted future first had to murder destiny to reach his own father. But before Kratos can deliver the killing blow, Athena throws herself between them. She intervenes to save Zeus and takes the strike meant for him. Kratos' blade pierces Athena instead, the goddess who had used him, guided him, manipulated him, but who had also, in her own twisted way, believed in him. As she dies in his arms, she finally tells him the truth that the gods have hidden for his entire life. The reason Zeus fears him. The reason for all of it. Zeus is his father. Kratos is a demigod, the son of the king of Olympus himself, born of a mortal woman, fathered by Zeus the way Zeus fathered so many of the great heroes. And the prophecy of the marked warrior who would destroy Olympus, it was never really about strange markings on a child's skin. It was about this: a son of Zeus, powerful enough and wronged enough to tear the whole sky down. Zeus had killed Kratos for the exact same reason Kratos' own actions kept killing the people he loved. Out of fear, out of the conviction that the only way to stop a catastrophe is to strike first. And Athena, with her dying breath, begs Kratos to stop, to understand, to break the cycle of patricide before it consumes everything. The father killed his own father before him. Now the son seeks to kill the father. And on it goes, generation after generation, each one certain they're the exception. Because that's the secret history sitting underneath the whole Greek pantheon, and the reveal of Kratos' parentage drags it into the light. Zeus overthrew his own father, Kronos, who had devoured his children out of terror that one of them would replace him, a fear that became the very thing that made it happen. Zeus is now doing the identical thing to Kratos, killing his son to prevent his son from killing him, and thereby guaranteeing exactly the outcome he dreads. It's not a coincidence repeating, it's a curse with a logic, a machine that feeds on its own fear, each generation watching the one before and learning all the wrong lessons. Kratos is simply the newest link in a chain that stretches back to the dawn of the gods, and he is about to do what every single link before him did: mistake the cycle for a personal grievance and pour himself into continuing it. But Kratos has been wronged too many times by too many gods to hear a word of it. He has nothing left inside him but the fire. Learning that Zeus is his father doesn't cool his vengeance, it pours oil on it. Because now the betrayal isn't just political, it's the oldest wound he has, reopened on a cosmic scale. A father who feared his son enough to murder him. A family that destroys what it cannot control. So Kratos makes his choice. He uses the power he tore from the Sisters of Fate, and he reaches back through time once more. Not to save himself this time, but to wage total war. He travels back to the moment the gods overthrew the Titans, and he pulls the Titans forward through time into the present. An army of primordial giants, ancient and furious, and ready to finish the war they lost. And in the final image of this chapter of his life, Kratos stands upon the shoulder of Gaia herself, leading the Titans up the side of Mount Olympus, climbing toward the home of the gods with an army of mountains at his back, his eyes fixed on the throne of his father. He is no longer a man seeking peace. He is no longer even a man seeking revenge for a single wrong.
He has become the apocalypse the gods spent generations trying to prevent. And the bitter irony, the thing that should make your skin crawl, is that he became it because of everything they did to prevent it. Every cruelty they inflicted to stop the prophecy is exactly what brought the prophecy to life. They built their own destroyer, one wound at a time. The climb to Olympus had begun, and on the other side of it lay the end of an entire world. What happens next is, without exaggeration, the death of a world.
The assault on Olympus begins exactly the way Kratos intended. Titans and gods clashing across the heavens, the sky itself becoming a battlefield, reality buckling under the weight of beings who were never meant to fight in the same age. Kratos climbs through the chaos toward Zeus, riding the great body of Gaia, certain that he finally has the strength to end his father. And then Gaia drops him, because the Titans, it turns out, never cared about Kratos at all. To them, he was exactly what he had been to everyone else his entire life. A weapon, a useful tool, a means to an end. The moment they reached the summit, Gaia abandoned him, willing to let him fall to his death now that he'd served his purpose. The mother of the Titans betrayed him as casually as the gods always had. And something in Kratos, finally, completely breaks loose. Up to this point, you could argue he had reasons, justifications. The gods wronged him, the Titans used him. Every act of violence had a target who had earned it. But after Gaia's betrayal, after being discarded one time too many, the last thread connecting Kratos' rage to anything like justice simply snaps. From here on, he is not seeking revenge against the guilty. He is at war with everything. Anyone who stands between him and Zeus will die, and the world itself can burn for all he cares. So it does. This is the part of the story that's genuinely hard to watch, because Kratos' rampage through the Greek pantheon is also, accidentally, the unmaking of the natural world. The gods aren't just rulers, they are the load-bearing pillars of reality itself. And as Kratos cuts them down one by one, each death tears a piece of existence with it. He kills Poseidon, god of the seas, and the oceans rise up and drown the world, flooding everything, swallowing entire civilizations beneath the waves. He kills Hades, lord of the underworld, and the boundary between the living and the dead begins to fail, the souls of the departed leaking back into a world that can no longer hold them. He kills Helios, the sun god, and tears his head from his shoulders, and the sun goes dark, the sky choking with eternal storm. He kills Hermes, and a plague pours out across the dying land. With every god that falls, the world Kratos is supposedly fighting in becomes more uninhabitable, more poisoned, more dead. He is winning his war by destroying the very thing the war was fought over. And notice the awful logic underneath each of these kills, because it isn't simply slaughter, it's the universe being punished for the crime of being held together by the people who wronged him. The Greeks built a cosmos where the gods weren't rulers sitting on top of nature, they were nature. Poseidon didn't govern the sea, he was the sea's restraint. Helios didn't command the sun, he was the reason it kept its course. So when Kratos drives a weapon through them, he isn't toppling a government, he's pulling out the nails that hold the sky up. Each god he hates is also a pillar he depends on, and he is too far gone to care that the roof is coming down on the heads of every innocent left below. The flood that drowns the world is, in a sense, the purest expression of who Kratos has become. A grief so total that it would rather see existence itself end than allow the people who caused it to go on existing. There's a specific kind of horror in how methodical it is, too. This isn't a berserker swept up in a red haze the way he was the night he killed his family. This Kratos is awake. He looks at Helios, a god, begging, pleading, and he tears the head from his shoulders anyway, and uses it afterward as a lantern, a tool, a thing. The man who once could not bear to buy his own peace with another father's grief now walks through a dying world, holding a murdered god's severed head up to light his path, and feels nothing about it. That's the measure of how far he's fallen. Not the body count, the indifference. The boy who couldn't stop crying over a brother has become a being who can hold a screaming god's skull as casually as a torch. And the thing is, he can see it happening. He is not blind to the cost. He simply no longer cares. The rage has consumed everything else, including the part of him that once turned away from his own daughter so that other people's children could live. That man chose the world over his own happiness. This man is feeding the world into a furnace to reach one person. The same soul. The distance between those two choices is the entire tragedy of Kratos. But even now, even at his absolute lowest, the story refuses to let him be only a monster. Because in the ruins of his rampage, Kratos meets a child. Her name is Pandora, not the legendary first woman. This is a girl, a construct given life, the living key required to access the power Kratos needs to defeat Zeus once and for all. To reach that power, Pandora must be sacrificed. And Kratos, who has sacrificed everything and everyone in pursuit of his vengeance, finds himself looking at this small, brave, doomed girl, and feeling something he thought he'd buried under the ashes of his own daughter. He sees Calliope in her. He can't help it. The protectiveness, the tenderness, the desperate, impossible wish to keep one innocent thing safe in a world he himself is destroying. It surges back up through all the rage, and for a while, Kratos actually tries to save Pandora. He fights to find another way. He, of all people, tries to spare a child rather than spend her. And it's Pandora herself who refuses. She understands what she is and what she's for, and with a courage that shames the gods and the titans both, she chooses to sacrifice herself, throwing herself into the flames so that the power can be released. Kratos tries to stop her. He fails. He loses another daughter, or the closest thing he had left to one, and this time it isn't even his blade that does it. This time, he simply wasn't strong enough to save her, which is, in its own way, the oldest failure he has. The boy who couldn't save his brother. The man who couldn't save his daughter. Again. Always again. And here is where the story delivers its single most devastating revelation. The reason all of this, the entire war, the drowning, the darkness, the plague, the reason the world has been falling apart isn't only because Kratos has been killing the gods. It goes back much further. It goes back to the very beginning of his quest, to the original god of war, to the day Kratos first opened Pandora's box to gain the power to kill Ares. Because when he opened that box, he didn't just take its power, he released what was inside it. The box contained the great evils, fear, hatred, greed, all the plagues of the spirit, sealed away to protect the gods. And when Kratos opened it, those evils flooded into the gods of Olympus and corrupted them from within, twisting them, making them cruel and fearful and paranoid over the long years. The reason the gods turned on Kratos, the reason Zeus grew so terrified, the reason Olympus became the rotten thing he's now tearing down, Kratos caused it. When he opened that box all those years ago, he infected the gods with the very evils that made them betray him. He has been fighting a war against monsters of his own making. The corruption he's punishing is corruption he loosed upon the world. The snake has been eating its own tail this entire time, and Kratos is both the head and the tail. But there was one thing in Pandora's box that he never knew about. One thing that didn't escape into the gods. One thing that stayed behind, sealed away, waiting. Hope. When all the evils of the world poured out of that box, hope alone remained inside it. And not inside the box at all, as it turns out, but inside the one who opened it. Inside Kratos. All these years, the most powerful force capable of healing the world had been locked away in the chest of the angriest man who ever lived, buried so deep beneath grief and rage that even he never knew it was there. The final confrontation between Kratos and Zeus is everything the entire saga has been building toward, and it is ugly, and it is personal, and it does not feel triumphant. Father and son, demigod and king, tearing at each other amid the wreckage of a dead world and a slain pantheon. And when Kratos finally overpowers Zeus, the rage that has driven him for so long does not let him stop at a clean kill. He beats his father to death with his bare hands. The screen itself runs red with it, a first-person blur of fists and blood, on and on, long past the point of death, long past the point of meaning. It is not justice. It is not even satisfying. It is a man emptying decades of pain into a corpse and finding, at the bottom of it, that there is nothing there. No relief, no peace. Just more blood on hands that were already covered in it. And when it's finally over, when Zeus is dead and the last god has fallen, and the world is a flooded, sunless, plague-ridden graveyard, the spirit of Athena returns, and she shows Kratos what she wanted all along. She wants the power of hope for herself, to rebuild the world in her own image, with the gods, what's left of them, back in control. She tells Kratos to surrender the power he carries, the hope sealed inside him. And this is worth pausing on, because Athena is the most quietly tragic figure in the entire Greek saga, and almost nobody notices. She was the one god who ever seemed to see something in Kratos beyond the weapon. She guided him in the early days. She defended him when the others wanted him gone. She believed, in her cold, strategic way, that he could be the instrument of something better than Olympus had become. She is also the goddess who threw herself onto his blade to save Zeus, who died in his arms, begging him to break the cycle of patricide, sounding for all the world like the one voice of wisdom in a family of frightened tyrants. You could have walked away from her death thinking she was the saga's conscience. But here she is, at the literal end of the world, revealing that her wisdom had curdled into the same disease that took everyone else. She watched the gods fall and concluded not that the gods were the problem, but that the wrong gods had been in charge. She wanted the throne. She wanted to be the hand that shaped mankind, to give them her enlightenment, whether they asked for it or not. Even wisdom, it turns out, is not immune to the hunger for control, and that may be the most chilling lesson Olympus had left to teach. And Kratos, for the first time in the entire saga, sees clearly. He understands what he is, what he's carried, what it's for. He understands that hope was never meant to belong to the gods. It was meant to belong to humanity, to the mortals the gods spent eternity using and discarding, the way they used and discarded him. So he makes his final choice. He takes the blade of Olympus, the weapon that killed him, the weapon that started his war against the heavens, and he turns it on himself. He drives it into his own chest. Not in despair this time, the way he stepped off that cliff so long ago. This time, it's deliberate. This time, it's a gift. By stabbing himself, Kratos releases the hope that's been trapped inside him out into the broken world, letting it pour out across the ruined earth, the one thing that might allow mortals to rebuild after everything he's destroyed. He gives humanity the power that the gods wanted to hoard, He spends his own life to undo, as much as anything can undo it, the apocalypse he became. Athena, furious and betrayed, pulls the blade from his chest and takes the power that's left, vanishing into the ruins. And Kratos is left alone, bleeding out on the edge of a cliff at the dead center of a dead world. The war over, the gods gone, his vengeance complete and utterly hollow. The camera lingers, and then, in the silence after the end of everything, it shows you the spot where Kratos fell. And he isn't there. There's only a trail of blood leading away from the edge, toward the unknown. The ghost of Sparta survived his own sacrifice, the way he survived everything else, and crawled off into a world he had emptied of gods. No more masters, no more bargains, no more prophecy left to fulfill. He had won the most complete victory anyone in any myth has ever won, and it had cost him every single thing, including the war itself, including the meaning of it. Think about what's left of him at this moment. He has killed the God who made him, the gods who used him, and the father who feared him. He has avenged his brother, his wife, his daughter, and himself. And standing in the wreckage, he is exactly as haunted, exactly as alone, exactly as full of ash as he was the night the oracle cursed him. Vengeance gave him everything he asked for, and not one thing he needed. And so the angriest man in the history of the world did the only thing left to do. He walked away from his own myth. He turned his back on Greece, on the gods, on the legend of Kratos, and he walked north, across the sea, across the edge of the known world, into lands that had never heard his name and worshipped gods who had never heard of him. He went looking, though he probably couldn't have told you so, for a place where he might be allowed to stop being a weapon. He had no idea that the thing he could never find through all that killing, the thing no god could grant and no vengeance could earn, was waiting for him in the snow, at the far end of the world, in the shape of a woman who would love the man and not the monster, and a boy who would call him something he had no right to ever be called again: Father. The man who arrived in the Norse lands was not the same creature that left Greece. Or rather, he was exactly the same creature, and he knew it. And that was the whole problem. We don't know everything about the years between. Kratos has never been one to narrate his own pain. But we know the shape of it. We know he traveled north until the names of his old gods meant nothing, into a frozen, mist-wrapped world of 9 realms bound together by a great tree, ruled by a pantheon of new gods who had never heard the words Ghost of Sparta. For the first time in his endless life, Kratos was nobody. No prophecy hung over him. No throne waited for him. No one was using him for anything. And in that anonymity, something almost impossible happened. He tried to bury Kratos. He took the blades of chaos, the weapons fused to his arms, the instruments of every atrocity he'd ever committed, wrapped them in cloth, and hid them away beneath the floorboards of a home, refusing to ever pick them up again. He took a new axe, a Norse weapon called the Leviathan, a tool of frost rather than fire. He stopped being a god. He started being, as much as a being like him could ever manage, just a man, a hunter in the woods, a husband, and eventually, incredibly, terrifyingly, a father for the second time in his life. Because somewhere in those quiet years, Kratos met a woman named Faye. We don't get to see much of their love story directly. We only get to feel its shape in the hole it leaves behind. But here's what matters about Faye. She loved Kratos. Not the legend, not the power, not the rage. The man. The closed-off, ash-skinned, sorrow-heavy man who had wandered into her world carrying a lifetime of blood he wouldn't talk about. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't try to sharpen him into a weapon the way every other relationship in his life had. She simply loved him as he was, and she believed, somehow, against all the evidence of his entire history, that he could be good, that he could be better. And think about how foreign that must have been to him. Every single bond in Kratos' first 300 years had been transactional. Ares wanted a weapon, Athena wanted an instrument, Zeus wanted control. Even the love he'd had, for Lysandra, for Calliope, had ended in him being used as the murder weapon against it. Kratos had no working model for being loved without being needed for something. He had spent his entire existence as a means to somebody else's end. And then, a woman in the frozen north looked at the most dangerous creature in two mythologies and wanted, simply, his company. Not his strength, not his rage. Him. There is no record of what that did to a man like Kratos, because Kratos doesn't talk about it. But you can measure it by the size of the silence she leaves. You can measure it by the fact that this is the relationship that finally got him to lay the blades down. Not a god's command, not a prophecy, but one woman's quiet, stubborn belief that the violence wasn't all he was. And they had a son, a boy named Atreus. You'd think this would be the happy ending. The monster finds peace, builds a family, gets the second chance he was never owed. But Kratos couldn't let himself believe in it, because Kratos remembered the last time he had a family. He remembered Lysandra. He remembered Calliope. He remembered the ash he was still wearing. And so he kept his distance from his own son, terrified, genuinely bone-deep terrified, that he was poison, that everything he loved died, that the worst thing he could possibly do to this boy was let himself love him too much. He was a father who held his child at arm's length, not out of coldness, but out of a grief so old and so deep that it looked exactly like coldness from the outside. And here is something the saga lets you feel without ever spelling out. Kratos' distance from Atreus was not only about the boy's safety, it was about Kratos' own. Because to love Atreus fully would mean opening, again, the exact wound that had defined his whole existence. The wound of having something to lose. The Spartan inside him, the one who learned at 5 years old that anything you love is a weakness your enemy can exploit, had never died. It had just gone quiet. And now it was screaming at him that he had made a catastrophic mistake, that he had handed the universe a hostage, that the smartest and kindest thing he could do for this child was to feel as little for him as possible. The tragedy of the early journey is watching a man fight a war inside his own chest, between the father who wants to pull his son close and the survivor who knows from brutal experience exactly what the world does to the things Kratos loves. And then Faye died. Before our story even truly begins, before we see almost any of it, the one person who loved Kratos as a man, the one who believed he could be more than his rage, the one holding the family together, was gone. And Kratos was left with a grief he had no idea what to do with. Because every other loss in his life had come with a target, someone to blame, someone to kill. The gods took his brother, kill the gods. Ares engineered the death of his family, kill Ares. Zeus murdered him, kill Zeus. Grief, for Kratos, had always been something you could avenge. But you cannot avenge a wife who simply died. There is no god to climb toward. There is no blade that fixes it. For the first time, Kratos was handed a loss he could only carry, not answer. And standing beside that grief was a boy, a son he barely knew how to speak to, who had just lost his mother, and who needed a father, and who had a stranger instead. Faye left them with one request, a last wish. She wanted her ashes scattered from the highest peak in all the 9 realms. And so this broken, silent man and his grieving, lonely boy set out together on a journey to honor a woman they both loved, and neither of them knew how to mourn. Two people bound by the same loss who could barely look at each other. And the first thing you learn about how Kratos relates to his son is the word he uses for him. He doesn't call him Atreus, not at first. He can't quite let himself get that close. He calls him simply boy. It's such a small thing, and it carries so much. Boy. A word that keeps the child at a careful distance. A word from a man who is so afraid of the damage he might do that he won't even let his son's name fully into his mouth. Every time Kratos says boy, you are hearing a father holding himself back from a love he believes he'll only destroy. But before they can even leave their own land, the past finds them. Because in this world, as in every world Kratos has ever lived in, the gods cannot leave a powerful man alone. A stranger comes to Kratos' door. He's an unremarkable-looking man at first, except that when Kratos confronts him, the stranger reveals he can feel no pain. None at all. Kratos beats him, throws him through walls, breaks him in ways that would kill anything mortal, and the stranger just laughs and gets back up, completely invulnerable, almost gleeful at finally finding someone who can hit hard enough to make the fight interesting. This is no ordinary man. This is a god of this new pantheon, though Kratos doesn't yet know his name, or why he's come, or what it has to do with the boy. His name is Baldur, and his arrival means the one thing Kratos was desperate to avoid. It means the old life has caught up to the new one. It means that somewhere on this journey to scatter his wife's ashes, Kratos is going to have to become, at least a little, the thing he buried under the floorboards. And it means his son is about to start asking questions about who his father really is. Questions Kratos has spent the boy's entire life praying he'd never have to answer. So they set out. A god pretending not to be one. A boy who doesn't know what he is. The ashes of the woman who held them together, and an immortal killer on their trail. And the highest peak in all the realms where they're meant to say goodbye, somewhere impossibly far ahead. Through 9 worlds full of monsters and gods and secrets. The journey had begun, and this time, for the first time in his endless, blood-soaked life, Kratos wasn't fighting to avenge the dead, or to destroy a throne, or to earn a peace he'd never receive. This time, he was just trying to get his son home alive, and to figure out, somewhere along the way, how to be the one thing he'd spent 2 pantheons proving he could never be. A good father. The journey through the 9 realms is, on its surface, a long walk to a mountaintop. Underneath, it's something much harder. It's 2 strangers learning the shape of each other. And at first, it goes badly. Atreus is everything Kratos doesn't know how to handle. The boy is curious, talkative, eager to please, prone to recklessness, hungry for his father's approval, and constantly failing to get it. When Atreus does something well, Kratos can't bring himself to say so. When Atreus does something wrong, Kratos comes down on him like the Spartan instructors who raised him. Harsh, cold, demanding. He doesn't know any other way to teach. The only model of fatherhood he's ever known is Zeus, a father who feared and murdered his son, and the brutal city that took him from his mother. He is trying to raise a child with nothing in his hands but the tools that broke him. "Don't be sorry," he tells the boy at one point. "Be better." It's the closest thing to a creed that Kratos has, and it's pure Sparta. No comfort, no warmth, just the relentless demand to improve. And you can see it landing on Atreus exactly the way it landed on Kratos once, as a wound dressed up as a lesson. But hold on to that phrase, because it's going to travel the entire length of this story and change its meaning completely by the end. And that journey is, in a sense, Kratos' whole journey in 3 words. When he first says it, Be better is a bark. It's the voice of every brutal instructor who ever stood over a freezing Spartan child and demanded more without offering a single ounce of tenderness. It's Kratos handing his son the exact philosophy that hollowed out his own childhood. The belief that you are only ever as good as your last performance, that apology is weakness, that the answer to failure is to harden. He means it as love. He has never known a version of love that didn't come dressed as a demand. And that's the tragedy hiding in the creed. A father trying to give his son the only gift he was ever given, not realizing the gift is also the wound. What's remarkable is that the phrase survives, but the man saying it transforms underneath it. Until, by the very end, be better means something almost opposite to what it meant at the start. It stops being a demand and becomes a kind of grace. Not be better or you have failed me, but be better than I was. You are allowed to be better than I was. You do not have to carry what I carried. The same 3 words spoken by a man who has finally learned that being better isn't about never falling short. It's about what you do with the falling short. That evolution, from a bark to a blessing, is the entire distance Kratos travels as a father, compressed into a phrase he keeps repeating without quite realizing it's been changing in his mouth the whole time. But the realms force them together in ways that slowly, painfully, start to work. Early in the journey, Atreus falls gravely ill. Violently, mysteriously sick, feverish, raging, lashing out, his small body unable to handle something happening inside it. And Kratos, the man who has stared down gods without blinking, is helpless. He doesn't understand what's wrong. He carries his son through the snow, desperate, and for the first time, we see the terror underneath the coldness. The absolute panic of a man watching the last person he has slip away from him, and not being able to fight it because there's nothing to hit. The truth, when it comes, cuts to the center of everything. Atreus is sick because of what he is, because Kratos never told him. The boy has been growing up not knowing that his father is a god, which means the boy doesn't know that he himself is part god, a demigod, his divine nature warring with his mortal body, because no one ever taught him to understand it. Atreus is, quite literally, being made sick by his father's silence, by the secret Kratos was too afraid to share. And so Kratos faces a choice he's been dreading since the day his son was born. To save Atreus, he has to tell him the truth. He has to admit what he is. He has to let his son look directly at the monster he spent his whole life hiding. He doesn't do it himself, not at first. He can't find the words, and they have to seek out the boy's true nature through other means to cure him. But the door is now open, and there's no closing it again. Atreus begins to understand that his father is not a hunter. His father is a god. And not just any god, a being with a past so dark that he spent a lifetime trying to bury it under cloth and floorboards. Here's where the writing does something brilliant and devastating. Because how do you think a boy reacts when he learns he's a god? Atreus gets cruel. The moment he understands he's divine, that he's better than mortals, special, powerful, he becomes arrogant, reckless, contemptuous. He starts killing without thought. He talks down to the creatures they meet. He becomes, in miniature, exactly the kind of god Kratos despises. Exactly the kind of god Zeus was. Exactly, in fact, the kind of monster Kratos himself once was. And Kratos watches his son curdle in real time, watches the boy he loves start to become the thing that destroyed 2 pantheons. And he is horrified, because he recognizes it. He's seen this disease before. He's had it. He knows where it leads. And this is the cruelest mirror the saga holds up to Kratos, because the arrogance isn't random. It's inherited. Not through blood, through silence. Atreus turns cruel precisely because he was handed enormous power with no story attached to it, no context, no cautionary history, nothing to weigh it against. He doesn't know what godhood cost his father. He doesn't know about the temple, the ash, the drowned world, the two dead pantheons. So when the power arrives, it arrives clean, exciting, consequence-free, a gift with no warning label. Because the one man who could have written that label was too ashamed to speak. Kratos protected his son from his past so completely that he left the boy defenseless against repeating it. The very secrecy that was meant to keep Atreus safe is the thing that nearly turns him into a tyrant. There may be no sharper statement of the saga's whole argument than this, that the things we refuse to tell our children don't disappear. They just wait to be reinvented. And watch the specific shape of Kratos' fear here, because it's not the fear you'd expect. He is not afraid Atreus will be weak. He is afraid Atreus will be strong in exactly the wrong way. Every other father in this story feared their child's power and tried to cage it. Kratos fears his child's character and tries to build it. That's the difference that will eventually save both of them. But in this moment, he doesn't have the answer yet. He just has the dawning, sickening recognition of his own face looking back at him out of his son's, and the desperate, fumbling, half-articulate determination to do something about it before it's too late. And in that horror, something shifts in Kratos. For the first time, he's not just trying to keep his son alive, he's trying to keep his son human. He's trying to make sure Atreus doesn't become him. And to do that, Kratos is going to have to confront his own past more honestly than he ever has. Because he can't teach the boy not to be a monster without admitting that he was one. They aren't alone on this road, thankfully. Along the way, they pick up companions who soften the grim journey and slowly pull humanity out of Kratos. There's the Witch of the Woods, a wise, kind woman living in seclusion who helps them more than once, who clearly carries her own buried history. There's the World Serpent, an impossibly enormous being coiled through the realms, ancient enough to remember things that haven't happened yet. There are two dwarven brothers, Brock and Sindri, bickering master craftsmen who forge and upgrade their weapons and provide some genuinely needed warmth and comedy in a story this heavy. And then there's Mimir. Mimir is, when they find him, a man pinned to the highest tree in the realm, the smartest man alive, an advisor who once served the Norse gods and now hangs as a prisoner of the Allfather. To free him and bring his knowledge along, Kratos has to cut off Mimir's head and have it magically reanimated so that for the rest of the journey, Kratos quite literally carries a talking head on his belt. And Mimir becomes something Kratos has never had before, a friend, a voice of wisdom and history and gentle prodding, someone who tells him stories, who pushes him to open up to his son, who serves as a kind of conscience and companion all at once. The man who fought alone for two pantheons now travels with a friend strapped to his hip, and it changes him, slowly, the way good company changes everyone. And it's hard to overstate how strange and important this is, because Kratos has genuinely never had this before. Not once in 300 years. Every relationship in his Greek life was either a master, a tool, a victim, or an enemy, usually several of those at once. He has never had a peer. He has never had someone who travels beside him with no agenda except wanting him to be a little less alone. Mimir is the first being in the entire story who is simply on Kratos' side, asking nothing, offering company. He fills the silences Kratos can't fill himself. He tells Atreus the stories about the realms that Kratos doesn't know how to tell. He coaxes the father and son toward each other when the distance between them gets dangerous, translating one to the other like a man who can see both halves of a wound that can't see itself. Kratos would never use the word, would probably grunt and look away if you said it to his face. But Mimir is the proof that the heart Sparta tried to burn out of him is still in there, capable of friendship, capable of warmth, after everything. You don't grow fond of someone if you're truly only a weapon, and Kratos, slowly, grows fond. There's even humor between them, which is its own small miracle. Mimir's endless cheerful chatter against Kratos' stone-faced silence becomes the rhythm the whole saga walks to. The smartest man alive, reduced to a head on a belt, refusing to stop being delightful about it. And every so often you catch the faintest crack in Kratos' grimness. Not a laugh, never that, but the ghost of one. The proof that something in him is thawing by degrees, in this company he never asked for, and clearly needs. But the deeper they travel, the clearer it becomes that this journey is not the simple errand it appeared to be. The stranger, Baldur, keeps returning, more obsessed each time, and through Mimir they begin to learn why. Baldur is the son of the goddess Freya, and Freya, it turns out, is the witch of the woods who helped them. Long ago, fearing for her son's life, Freya cast a spell to make Baldur invulnerable, unable to be harmed by anything. But she did it without his consent, and the spell didn't only block pain, it blocked everything. Baldur cannot feel cold, or warmth, or pleasure, or a single physical sensation of any kind. For 100 years he has been utterly numb, unable to feel the rain, the sun, the touch of another person, alive but cut off from being alive. And he hates his mother for it with a passion that has consumed him completely. Do you hear the echo? Because Kratos certainly does, even if he never says it. Baldur is a child destroyed by a parent's fear. A parent who tried so hard to protect their son from death that they robbed him of life. A protective love that became a prison. It's Freya's version of the exact mistake every parent in this entire saga keeps making. The gods taking Deimos to prevent a prophecy. Zeus killing Kratos to prevent a prophecy. Freya numbing Baldur to prevent his death. Fear of losing a child twisted into the very thing that destroys them. And Kratos is, at this very moment, raising a son of his own. Watching, learning, trying not to make the same mistake. Trying to figure out how much truth to give the boy, how much freedom, how much protection. Knowing now, from Baldur, exactly what happens when a parent gets that balance catastrophically wrong. The mountaintop they were searching for, the highest peak in all the realms, turns out not to be in their own world at all. The truth is hidden, the way the most important truths in this story always are, and getting to it costs them. There's a moment deep in the journey when Kratos is forced to do the one thing he swore he never would. They reach an obstacle that the Leviathan axe cannot overcome, a path that can only be crossed with fire, in a place sealed against the frost of his Norse weapon. And to save Atreus, to keep moving, Kratos has to go home, dig beneath the floorboards, and take up the blades of chaos again. The weapons of Ares, the chains seared into his arms, the instruments of every horror in his Greek life. Watch what this costs him. As Kratos unwraps those blades, the ghost of Athena appears to him, a manifestation of his own guilt, his own past, taunting him, reminding him that he can run to the ends of the earth and change his weapons and learn a new language and bury himself in snow, but he will always, always be the monster who burned a world. You cannot change, she tells him. And Kratos, holding the blades of his worst self, with his son waiting outside who must never know the full truth, answers her. He says he must. For the boy, he must change. He picks up the symbols of everything he was, and he uses them to protect everything he's trying to become. That's the whole Norse saga in a single image, really. A man holding the weapons of his past in his scarred hands, choosing, against the testimony of his own history, to use them for love instead of rage. But the truth that's been hiding beneath this entire journey finally surfaces, and it changes everything they thought they understood. They reach Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. And it is there, in a temple covered in murals, that the secret of Fae is revealed.
Faye was a giant. Not a human woman who happened to marry a wandering god. A Jotun, one of the giants, the very beings the Norse gods had hunted nearly to extinction. The woman Kratos loved, the mother of his child, was a member of a doomed and prophetic people. Which means Atreus is not simply part god, he is part giant too. And the giants, before they vanished, were seers. They painted the future on their walls. And there, on the temple walls of Jotunheim, the giants had painted the story of Atreus' life. His real name, the one the giants had always known him by, the one Faye had wanted to give him all along. Loki. Atreus is Loki. The boy walking beside Kratos, the son he's been so afraid of failing, is the figure the giants prophesied would play a central role in the fate of all the realms, in Ragnarok itself, the foretold end of the Norse world. Faye knew. She named him Atreus after a good man, a mortal soldier she admired, but the giants had always called him Loki, and she had been guiding her family toward this temple, toward this truth, the entire time. Even the journey to scatter her ashes was, in part, her way of leading her husband and son to the knowledge they would need. But the mural held one more image, one that Kratos saw and understood, and chose to hide from his son. Among the painted prophecies was a depiction of Atreus, grieving, cradling the dead body of his father. The giants had foreseen Kratos' death. They had painted Atreus weeping over Kratos' corpse. And Kratos, looking at the image of his own death and his son's grief, said nothing. He folded that knowledge into himself, the way he folds everything, and kept walking. A father who has just been shown that he is fated to die and leave his boy alone, choosing to carry that secret silently so the child won't have to. And notice what this moment reveals about how Kratos loves, because it's both his greatest strength and his most persistent flaw rolled into a single, silent decision. Faced with a prophecy of his own death, his instinct is not to rage against it, not to share the burden, not to sit his son down and face the future together. His instinct is to swallow it, to carry it alone, to protect Atreus from a painful truth by keeping him in the dark. Which is, of course, the exact mistake that nearly killed the boy with the secret of his own godhood. The exact pattern of protective silence that this entire saga keeps warning against. Kratos cannot help himself. The man learned in a Spartan childhood and 300 years of war that the strong carry their pain in silence and never let it show. He thinks he's shielding his son. He's actually building the same wall that every grieving, frightened parent in this story builds, brick by well-intentioned brick. The difference, the thing that will eventually save them both, is that this particular wall has a door in it, and Kratos, unlike Zeus and Odin and Freya, will one day find the courage to open it. But not yet. For now, he just looks at the painting of his own corpse, says nothing, and keeps climbing, carrying his death the way he carries everyone else's, quietly, on a back that has never once been allowed to set anything down. But before they could leave the realms in any kind of peace, there was Balder. And the confrontation with Balder is where the whole tangled web of parents and children and protective curses finally explodes. In the final battle, Freya, the witch, Balder's mother, intervenes to protect her son, even though her son has come to kill her. And in the chaos, Balder is struck by a piece of mistletoe, the one substance, it turns out, that Freya in her ancient spell forgot to protect him against, the single loophole in his invulnerability. The moment the mistletoe touches him, the spell breaks. Balder can feel again. After 100 years of total numbness, sensation floods back into his body. The cold, the wind, the pain, all of it. And for one brief instant, he is overwhelmed, almost grateful. And then he turns to kill his mother for what she did to him. Sit with the horror of that for a moment, because it's one of the most genuinely tragic turns in either saga. For 100 years, all Balder wanted was to feel anything, a single sensation,
proof that he was still alive inside the prison his mother's love had built around him. And the instant he finally gets it back, the very first thing he chooses to do with his restored ability to feel is to channel it entirely into killing the person who took it from him. He could have walked out into the world and felt rain for the first time in a century. Instead, the numbness curdled into a hatred so total that even feeling itself became just another weapon to aim at his mother. That's what 100 years of being denied your own life does to a soul. It doesn't make you grateful for the life returned. It makes you unable to want anything except revenge for the years stolen. Kratos stops him. He intervenes, and he gives Baldur a chance, tells him to walk away, to let it go, that this path of vengeance against a parent leads nowhere good. Kratos, of all people, who spent his entire Greek life consumed by exactly this, who beat his own father to death with his bare hands and found nothing at the bottom of it, is begging another wronged son to choose differently. He is trying to break the cycle out loud, for the first time, by sparing the life of the man trying to kill him. And there is something almost unbearable in watching Kratos play this role, because he is, in this moment, every character in the scene at once. He is Baldur, the child wronged by a parent's fear, who let that wrong become his entire identity. He is also the father who would do anything to spare his own son this exact fate. He has stood on both sides of this wound across his long life, and he knows, better than any being alive, that vengeance against a parent is a door that opens onto an empty room. He killed Zeus and got nothing. He is trying to hand Baldur the lesson that cost him 300 years and 2 pantheons to learn, for free, in a few desperate words. And it doesn't work. Because some wounds are too old to be talked out of, and Baldur's has had a century to set. But Baldur won't stop. He cannot let it go. His hatred for his mother is the only thing he has left, and he lunges for her throat one final time. And so, Kratos kills him, snaps his neck, not out of rage, but to protect Freya from the son she ruined trying to protect him. Freya cradles her dead boy, and though Kratos saved her life, though Baldur would have killed her, she does not see it that way. She sees only that this stranger murdered her son, and she swears over Baldur's body that she will spend the rest of her existence hunting Kratos down. She will have her vengeance. Another mother, another dead son. Another vow of revenge added to the long, long list of debts that follow Kratos wherever he goes. He came to this world to escape his myth, and his myth is simply rewriting itself in a new language. And the terrible symmetry of it would not be lost on him. A parent mad with grief over a dead child, swearing to destroy the one responsible. He has been Freya. He has knelt over the bodies of people he loved and turned the whole world into a target. He knows precisely where her grief is about to take her, because it is the road his own feet wore smooth. The difference, and it is the difference the entire Norse saga will test, is whether anyone in this story can be the first to step off that road before it ends where it always ends. And here, in the aftermath, comes one of the most important conversations Kratos ever has with his son about what just happened. Because Atreus watched his father spare an enemy, try to break a cycle, and kill only when there was no other choice to protect someone else. And Kratos finally tells the boy the thing he's been circling the entire journey. He tells him the truth. That he, Kratos, is a god. That gods are flawed and cruel, and that the worst of them let their power make monsters of them. He tells his son that they will be different. That they are not going to be the kind of gods the world has known. We will be the gods we choose to be, he says in effect. Not the gods they were born as. They will be better. And for the first time, Kratos starts to mean it not just for the boy, but for himself. And finally, they reach the summit, the highest peak in all the realms, which was in Jotunheim all along. And the broken god and his son scatter the ashes of Faye, wife, mother, giant, guide, into the wind over a world she helped shape and never got to see saved. As the ashes drift away, the world serpent reappears, and Mimir notices something extraordinary. The serpent seems to recognize Atreus. It reacts to him as if it knows him. Mimir realizes the truth. The serpent is so enormous, so old, that it exists across time itself. And at some point in the future, something will happen that hurls the great serpent backward through time to the beginning. Which means the world serpent doesn't recognize Atreus from the past. It recognizes him from a future that hasn't happened yet. And then, on the very last night of their journey, Atreus has a dream, a vision. He sees Thor, the god of thunder, the most feared warrior of the Norse pantheon, the son of the All-Father Odin, arriving at their door, coming for them, coming for revenge, because Kratos killed Balder, and Balder was Odin's kin, and the gods of Asgard do not let the death of their own go unanswered. The journey to scatter Faye's ashes was over, but what they had set in motion by completing it, the death of Balder, the awakening of Atreus' true nature, the great winter the prophecies foretold, was only the beginning. They had not found peace at the top of that mountain. They had found the front edge of the end of the world. When the end of the world finally begins, it doesn't arrive with fire. It arrives with snow. They call it Fimbulwinter, the Great Winter, the brutal, unending freeze that the prophecies say must come before Ragnarok, the final battle that ends the Norse age and everything in it. By the time we return to Kratos and Atreus, this winter has been crushing the realms for years. The snow doesn't stop. The world is locked in ice. And in their little home at the edge of it all, father and son are waiting. Waiting for Thor. Waiting for war. Waiting for the future the giants painted on those walls to come and collect them. But something has shifted between them. And it's the most ordinary, most universal shift in the world. Atreus has grown up. The boy who needed his father to carry him through the snow is now nearly a man. Restless, hungry, full of questions his father can't or won't answer. He knows he's Loki now. He knows the giants prophesied something enormous about him, and he wants to know what. He wants to understand his purpose, his role in the end of the world, who he's meant to be. And Kratos, the father who was shown a mural of his own death, who knows that the path of prophecy leads to him lying cold in his son's arms, wants exactly one thing. He wants the boy to stay small, to stay safe, to stay home. And so the two of them are locked in the oldest war there is. Not gods and giants, a father trying to protect his child by holding on, and a child trying to become himself by pulling away. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every silence is a battle. Kratos has spent the entire previous journey learning to be tender, and now he's discovering the cruelest lesson of fatherhood. That the more you love them, the more they need to leave, and the harder it becomes to let them. And what makes this fracture so painful to watch is that both of them are right, and both of them are wrong, in exactly the way real fathers and real sons are. Kratos isn't being paranoid. He carries a mural that shows his own death down this road. Atreus isn't being a brat. He's a young man who genuinely needs to learn who he is, and a cage built out of love is still a cage. Neither of them can fully say what they mean, because Kratos has never in his life been good with words, and Atreus is at the age where everything a father says lands as control. So the love between them keeps coming out as friction, the father gruff and withholding, the son resentful and reckless. And the very thing that binds them is the thing driving them apart.
It is, in miniature, the entire pattern the saga keeps tracing. How a parent's fear for a child becomes a wall between them. How protection curdles into control without anyone choosing it. How the people who most need to understand each other are often the worst equipped to try. The difference, and this is the whole reason their story doesn't end like Baldur's or Thor's, is that underneath the friction, Kratos is paying attention. He's watching the cracks form. He's recognizing, even as he makes them, the exact mistakes that Freya made, and Zeus made, and Odin will make. He doesn't have the words to fix it yet, but he has the awareness that something is going wrong, and the desperate, inarticulate determination not to lose his son the way every other parent in this story lost theirs. That awareness is the thin thread the entire future hangs from. We see exactly how dangerous this fracture is in their very first hunt of the new saga. Atreus, frustrated, reckless, eager to prove himself, transforms, his giant nature surging out of him, and shifts into the shape of a great beast, losing himself to it, attacking blindly. Kratos has to physically subdue his own transformed son in the snow, wrestling the animal the boy has become back into the boy. It's terrifying for both of them. Atreus is changing into things neither of them understands, and Kratos cannot protect him from a danger that lives inside his own blood. And then the past comes knocking, the way it always does. Freya finds them. She's been hunting Kratos since the day he killed Baldur, exactly as she swore. But there's a cruel twist to her vengeance. Odin, the Allfather, long ago placed a curse on Freya that traps her in this realm, that prevents her from leaving, that has caged her like a bird for ages, even as it pretends to be protection. So she comes for Kratos again and again, unable to truly leave, unable to truly win, bound by the manipulations of a god who claims to be her ally. She is, in her own way, exactly like Kratos, a being whose grief is being weaponized by Odin, pointed wherever the All-Father wants it pointed. And here is where Kratos does something the Greek version of himself could never have imagined. Instead of simply killing the woman hunting him, instead of adding one more body to the pile, Kratos chooses to free her. He helps lift the curse Odin placed on her. He breaks her cage. He gives his enemy back her freedom, knowing she might use it to kill him. And it works. Not at first. Freya's grief is real, and her hatred is earned. But slowly, through shared enemies and hard-won trust, the woman who swore to destroy Kratos becomes one of his most important allies. Two grieving parents, both used by gods, both having lost their sons in different ways, learning to fight side by side. Freya's arc mirrors Kratos' own redemption. She has to learn, just as he did, that vengeance is a fire that consumes the one who carries it, and that letting it go is not weakness, but the hardest strength there is. And the way Freya gets there is one of the most honest things the saga ever does, because it refuses to make it easy or quick. She doesn't forgive Kratos because he frees her from the curse. For a long time after, she still wants him dead, accepting his help with one hand while reaching for his throat with the other, because that's how real grief actually works. It doesn't dissolve the moment someone does you a kindness. There's a point where Freya, faced with the chance to finally kill Kratos, has to choose between two futures. The one where she avenges Baldur, and the one where she becomes something more than the wound Odin left in her. And what finally turns her is not Kratos at all. It's the recognition, slowly dawning, that her hatred had made her into Odin's tool just as surely as the curse ever did. That as long as she defined her whole existence by Baldur's death, the All-Father still owned her, still pointed her wherever he liked. To let the vengeance go was the only way to finally be free of the god who had caged her. Her liberation, in the end, isn't the breaking of a magic spell. It's the breaking of the older, deeper cage that grief builds from the inside.
And there's a quiet tragedy threaded through her alliance with Kratos that neither of them ever fully says aloud. He killed her son. That is simply true, and it stays true, and no amount of fighting shoulder to shoulder erases it. What they build is not a friendship that pretends the wound away. It's something rarer and harder. Two people choosing to stand together despite a thing between them that can never be made right. Kratos doesn't ask Freya to forgive him. Freya doesn't pretend she has. They just decide, day by day, that the future is worth more than the debt. It's the same lesson Kratos has been failing to learn his entire existence, finally taught back to him by the very person with the most reason to refuse it. But the war is coming, whether they're ready or not. And the question that drives the whole saga is this: is Ragnarok inevitable? The prophecy says the world must end. It says Kratos must die. It says Atreus has a role to play. And Kratos has spent his whole life learning that prophecies are traps, that everything the gods did to prevent the marked warrior is exactly what created him. So he refuses to simply march toward the foretold ending. He looks for another way. He searches for someone who might know how to stop the end of the world rather than start it. That search leads them to Tyr. Tyr is the Old Norse god of war, but not like Ares, not like Kratos. Tyr was a god of peace, of diplomacy, of bridges between peoples. Beloved by the giants, opposed to Odin's endless hunger for conquest and knowledge. He was believed dead, killed by Odin long ago. But rumors say he survived, imprisoned somewhere, and that if anyone could find a path through Ragnarok that didn't end in total annihilation, it would be him. So Kratos and Atreus undertake a desperate journey to find and free Tyr, a god of war who might teach them how to avoid a war. And there's something almost beautiful about Kratos, the most destructive god who ever lived, the former god of war of an entire dead pantheon, looking to a different kind of god of war as a model. Looking at Tyr and seeing what he might have been in another life, if the universe had been kinder. Tyr represents the road not taken, the version of strength that builds instead of burns. They find him, they free him, and the broken, gentle god joins their cause, counseling restraint, counseling peace, urging them away from the path of bloodshed. For a while, it seems like they might actually have found the thread that unravels the prophecy, a way to stop Ragnarok before it consumes everything. But we'll come back to Tyr, because nothing in Odin's world is ever quite what it appears to be, and the All-Father plays a longer game than anyone realizes. Meanwhile, Atreus pursues his own thread of the mystery, and it leads him somewhere Kratos can't follow. To Ironwood, a hidden realm where he meets a girl named Angerboda, a young giant, the last of the giants, in fact, living alone among the relics of her vanished people. Angerboda is the first person Atreus' own age he's ever met, the first being who shares his heritage, the first one who can tell him what being Loki actually means. And through her, Atreus learns the rest of his story, including a truth that lands like a stone. In Ironwood, Angerboda has been painting the prophecies, the murals that show the future, the same kind Kratos saw in Jotunheim. And she reveals to Atreus the image his father has been hiding from him all this time. The mural of Atreus, grieving, holding the dead body of Kratos. So now the son knows what the father knew. Atreus learns that the prophecy foretells his father's death, that if they continue down this path, Kratos dies and Atreus is left alone, weeping over his corpse, exactly as the giants painted it. And it changes the boy completely, because now everything Atreus does is colored by a desperate, secret terror, that his destiny is to lose his father, and that maybe, if he's clever enough, if he handles things himself, if he keeps Kratos out of the dangerous parts, he can outrun the painting on the wall. Two people, father and son, each separately carrying the same terrible knowledge, each separately trying to protect the other from it, each separately convinced that the way to save the one they love is to push them away. It's the Balder tragedy all over again, the Deimos tragedy, The Zeus tragedy. Love curdling into control because of fear. The exact pattern this entire saga has been warning against, now playing out in the one relationship that's supposed to break it. And waiting at the center of the web, watching all of it, is the All-Father himself. You should understand who Odin actually is, because he is the most dangerous kind of villain, the kind whose evil is built entirely out of fear. Odin, the All-Father, ruler of Asgard, is not a brute. He's not a raging tyrant like Ares, or a paranoid king like Zeus. Not exactly. Odin is something quieter and more insidious. Odin is afraid. He is consumed by a single terror above all others, the fear of the unknown, the fear of his own death, the fear of what lies beyond the end. And he has spent his entire existence clawing for knowledge, for control, for any scrap of understanding that might let him cheat the fate he's certain is coming. There is a great tear in reality, a rift that he believes holds the answer to everything beyond death, and Odin will do anything, betray anyone, sacrifice anyone, destroy anything to pry it open and learn what's on the other side. He is, in other words, exactly what Kratos used to be. A being so terrified of his own ending that he'll burn down the world trying to escape it. And the genius of the whole saga is that it surrounds Kratos with mirrors. Balder, Freya, Thor, Odin himself. Each one a different version of the trap Kratos has spent his life caught in. Each one showing him a different way that fear and grief can hollow a person out. And Odin's true weapon isn't his strength, it's his tongue. He doesn't conquer with armies, he whispers. He finds the cracks in people and pours himself into them. And he finds the widest crack of all in a frightened boy who has just learned that his destiny is to bury his own father. Because Atreus, terrified of the prophecy, desperate for answers his father refuses to give, makes a fateful decision. He goes to Asgard, secretly, alone. He walks into the home of the enemy, into the den of the All-Father, to seek the knowledge no one else will give him. And Odin is waiting for him with open arms and a kind voice. The All-Father doesn't threaten Atreus, he welcomes him. He offers him a place, a purpose, a project, that mysterious rift, that tear in reality, which Odin claims only Loki can help him open. He flatters the boy. He listens to him. He gives Atreus exactly what Kratos, in all his protective fear, has been withholding. Respect, answers, the feeling of being treated like he matters. Odin even introduces Atreus to a kind of family in Asgard, makes him feel at home there. And it's agonizing to watch, because you understand why it works. Atreus isn't stupid. He's lonely. He's scared. He's a teenager who feels caged by a father who loves him too anxiously to let him breathe. And here is a powerful, patient old god offering him everything he's starving for. The fact that it's all a manipulation doesn't make the need underneath it any less real. Odin is exploiting a genuine wound in the relationship between Kratos and his son, a wound that Kratos' own fear helped create. And then there's Thor. When you first meet Thor, he is exactly the monster the legends promise, the largest, most powerful warrior in the Norse pantheon, the god who has personally slaughtered giants by the hundreds at his father's command, the executioner of Odin's will. He arrives at Kratos' door wreathed in thunder, and the first encounter between them is a clash of two living catastrophes. But the more we learn about Thor, the more the monster cracks open into something heartbreakingly human. Thor is a broken man. He's a drunk, drowning himself in mead to silence the things he's done. He has lost both of his sons, Magni and Modi, killed during Kratos and Atreus' previous journey, and the grief has gutted him. He has a daughter, Thrud, whom he loves and wants desperately to protect, and a wife, Sif, whom he's failed. And the worst part? The part that makes him a perfect dark mirror of Kratos.
is that Thor knows he's a monster. He knows his father made him into a weapon, pointed him at the giants, and used him to commit genocide. He hates what he is. He drinks to forget it. And some buried part of him wants more than anything to be a better father to his daughter than his father ever was to him. Sound familiar? Thor is what Kratos could have become if Faye had never found him. He's the cautionary version.
The father who wanted to break the cycle but was too weak, too broken, too dominated by his own monstrous father to ever actually do it. When Kratos looks at Thor, he is looking at the ghost of his own worst self, and terribly, at the possibility that wanting to change isn't always enough. And the saga sharpens that mirror with one specific devastating detail. Thrud. Thor's daughter idolizes him. She wants to be a warrior like her father, wants his approval, trains to follow in exactly his footsteps. And Thor, in his clearer moments, is horrified by it, because he knows where his footsteps lead. He doesn't want his daughter to become what Odin made him. He wants, desperately, for her to be free of the family disease. It's the same fear that lives in Kratos' chest about Atreus. The identical terror of watching your child reach for the very thing that destroyed you. But where Kratos found, somehow, the strength to actually fight that fear, to tell his son hard truths and steer him towards something better, Thor just drinks. He loves Thrud and fails her in the same breath, because the one thing he cannot do is the thing Kratos learned to do: stand up to the father in his own head. Sif, his wife, watches both of them drown and can't save either. It's a whole family slowly going under, and the only reason Kratos' family isn't doing the same is a series of choices Thor was never strong enough to make. What makes Thor genuinely tragic rather than merely villainous is that the goodness in him is real. It's not an act. When he lowers his hammer, when he speaks about his sons, when he looks at his daughter, you can see the man he could have been if anyone had ever fought for him the way Faye fought for Kratos. Nobody did. He had Odin instead. And Odin needed a weapon, not a son. So the weapon is what Thor became. And the man underneath spent centuries screaming inside a body that kept doing terrible things at his father's word. He is the answer to a question the whole saga is quietly asking. What happens to a Kratos who never gets a Faye, never gets a Mimir, never gets a second chance? You get Thor. You get a good man buried alive inside a monster who knows exactly what he is and drinks so he doesn't have to keep knowing. And the All-Father holds Thor on a leash made of guilt and need, just as he holds everyone. Odin keeps Thor drinking, keeps him violent, keeps him from ever quite finding the strength to walk away. Because a sober Thor who loved his daughter more than he feared his father would be a Thor that Odin couldn't use. But the cruelest manipulation of all was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Remember Tyr, the gentle god of war they rescued? The one counseling peace, the one who joined their family and shaped their path away from violence? It was Odin, the entire time. The Tyr they freed was the All-Father in disguise, wearing the face of a beloved dead god, embedded in the heart of Kratos' own household, listening to every plan, steering every decision, learning their every secret from the inside. The wise counsel toward peace, the patient guidance, all of it was Odin, gathering intelligence, keeping his enemies exactly where he could see them. Kratos brought the most dangerous being in the realms into his home and called him a friend. The betrayal is total. And the cruelty of the disguise is so precise that it almost takes a second to feel its full weight. Odin didn't wear just any face. He wore the face of the one god who represented everything Kratos was reaching toward. The gentle warrior, the peacemaker, the proof that strength didn't have to mean destruction. Kratos looked at Tyr and saw a model for the being he wanted to become. He freed him with something like hope. He let Tyr's quiet counsel toward restraint shape his own choices, let himself believe that a different kind of god of war was possible and standing right there in his home. And the entire time, that gentle voice urging peace was Odin. Not because Odin wanted peace, but because a Kratos who hesitated, who second-guessed, who held back, was a Kratos easier to manage. The All-Father didn't just spy on them. He poisoned the very ideal Kratos was trying to grow into, using Kratos' own longing to be better as the leash. There may be no sharper portrait of Odin's particular evil than this. He found the best thing in his enemy's heart and wore it like a mask. And it reframes every gentle moment of the journey in retrospect. Every time Tyr counseled patience, every quiet conversation, every piece of wisdom the family leaned on, all of it was the enemy, taking notes. Kratos has been betrayed by gods his entire existence, but this betrayal is different in kind. Because this time, he wasn't betrayed by someone he feared or served. He was betrayed by someone he'd begun to trust, in the home he'd built to be safe, in front of the son and the friends he was trying to protect. The fortress he constructed out of chosen family had a crack in its foundation the whole time, and the crack was shaped exactly like hope. And it comes to a head in the most devastating possible way. Brok, the foul-mouthed, good-hearted dwarven craftsman who has been with Kratos since the beginning, who forged his weapons and bickered with his brother and slowly became family. Brok figures it out. He realizes that Tyr is Odin, and the moment he does, Odin kills him. But it's worse than a death, because Brok had died once before, long ago, and his brother Sindri had brought him back, but brought him back incomplete, without his full soul. Brok was always missing a piece of himself, living on borrowed, partial life. And it means that when Odin murders him, Brok doesn't go to any afterlife. He doesn't go to Valhalla, the warrior's paradise. He doesn't go anywhere. He simply ends. Completely. Forever. The most final death the Norse world allows, inflicted on one of the gentlest souls in it. And to understand why this breaks something that never gets fixed, you have to understand what Brok and Sindri were to each other, and to the whole strange family that gathered around Kratos. They were the heart of it. The two bickering dwarves, forever insulting each other, forever inseparable, were the warmth that made the grim journey bearable. The comic relief that turned out, like all the best comic relief, to be carrying the emotional weight of the entire thing. Brok in particular had a gruff, foul-mouthed tenderness that snuck past Kratos' defenses, that softened Atreus, that made the little band feel less like a war party and more like people who had chosen each other. He was, in his crude way, one of the few beings who treated Kratos not as a god or a monster or a weapon, but as a friend who needed ribbing. And he died finding out the truth, killed for the crime of being clever enough to see through Odin's mask. And it destroys Sindri. The grief-stricken brother who spent everything he had to keep Brok alive, who now has to watch him die a second and absolute death, and who blames everyone, including Kratos, including himself, for letting Odin in. Sindri's warmth curdles into a cold, broken fury that will never fully heal. The family that Kratos so painstakingly built across 2 games begins to come apart at exactly the moment he needs it most. What makes Sindri's grief so much harder to watch than any battlefield death is how recognizably, achingly human it is. Sindri was the anxious one, the careful one, the brother who fussed and cleaned and worried. And underneath all of it, the one who could not survive losing Brok, and now has to. His pain doesn't make him noble, it makes him cruel, withdrawn, unreachable. He turns on the people who love him. He cannot be comforted, because comfort would mean accepting a world in which Brok is gone, and he will not accept that world, even though he's trapped in it. The saga is brave enough to show that grief doesn't always ennoble a person. Sometimes it just breaks them, and the breaking doesn't come with a redemption arc attached. Sindri loses his brother, and in a very real sense, he loses himself too. And no victory over Odin gives either of them back. So now everything is in motion. Odin has Atreus half-turn. Thor is a loaded weapon his father keeps pointed at Kratos. Brock is dead, the family is fracturing, and the great winter is finally, after all these years, about to break into fire. Ragnarok was no longer a prophecy on a wall. It was a war about to begin. And Kratos, who had spent his entire second life trying to avoid becoming the destroyer one more time, was about to learn whether a man can fight the end of a world without becoming the thing that ends it. The decision to bring the war to Odin rather than wait for it changes Kratos in a way that's quietly staggering when you think about where he started. Because for the first time in his existence, Kratos becomes a leader of something other than a conquering army. He becomes the center of an alliance. Freya, the former enemy. The defectors of Asgard who can no longer stomach Odin's cruelty. The dwarves. The spirits of the dead. The scattered survivors of every people the Allfather has wronged. They look to Kratos. They follow him. And the man who spent his Greek life using soldiers like firewood now finds himself responsible for the lives of beings who believe in him. The change isn't loud. He doesn't give grand speeches, but you can see it in how carefully he now weighs the cost of every life. In a man who once flooded the world to reach one throne. And there's a moment in the gathering of that alliance that quietly tells you the whole story of how far he's come. When the others look to him to lead the assault, Kratos hesitates. Not out of weakness, but out of the deepest kind of self-knowledge. He, of all beings, understands what it means to follow a man of war. He has been the war that other people followed, and he has seen exactly where that following leads. To drowned cities, to dead worlds, to soldiers spent like coins. So when he finally accepts the role, he does it with a gravity that none of his Greek conquests ever had. He's not leading them to glory. He's leading them to a war he knows the price of better than any general who ever lived. And he intends, this time, to spend as little of it as the end of the world will allow. The tyrant who once measured victory in the size of the wreckage now measures it in who he manages to bring home. That is not a small evolution. That is the entire difference between the god of war he was and the one he is about to become. To bring Ragnarok itself, the cleansing fire that must consume Asgard, they need Surtur, the great fire giant of prophecy. And here the saga delivers one of its most beautiful and most painful images of love. Surtur has waited an eternity for this moment, and to become Ragnarok, to become the fire that ends the world, he must give himself up entirely, burning away his own being to become a force of pure destruction. His beloved, Sinmara, stays with him to the end, and the two of them choose this together, one sacrificing himself to save the realms, the other bearing witness so he won't burn alone. Even at the literal end of the world, the story keeps insisting on the same truth, that the only thing that ever redeems any of this is love freely given. And so the armies march on Asgard, and the sky splits, and the great winter finally breaks into flame. Ragnarok begins. The battle is everything two mythologies of build-up promised. Gods and giants and the dead clashing across a burning city. The walls of Asgard cracking, the prophecy unfolding in real time. But the saga never loses sight of the fact that this war, like all of Kratos' wars, comes down to individual fathers and sons and the choices they make in the worst moments of their lives. Kratos comes face to face with Thor one final time, in the heart of the burning city. And their last fight is brutal, the two most destructive beings in the realm tearing at each other amid the flames. Kratos wins. He beats the god of thunder, and he has him at his mercy. And the old Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, would have ended it there without a thought, the way he ended Ares, the way he beat Zeus into the dirt.
But this Kratos has learned something across all these years and all these deaths. He doesn't kill Thor. He offers him a hand instead. He tells him to stop. He tells him that they are both monsters their fathers made, both weapons pointed by men who feared them, and that the cycle can end here, with them. That Thor can choose to be something better for his daughter, the way Kratos is trying to be something better for his son. He offers his enemy the exact mercy and the exact second chance that Faye once offered him.
And you have to measure this moment against the being we met 300 years ago to feel how staggering it is. The Greek Kratos beat a defeated, pleading Zeus into a red smear with his bare hands and felt nothing at the bottom of it. He tore the head off a begging Helios and used it as a lamp. Mercy was not a tool he owned. An enemy at his mercy was simply an enemy not yet dead. And here, in the burning heart of Asgard, with the most powerful warrior of a second pantheon beaten in front of him, every reflex in his body screaming the old answer, he stops. He opens his hand. He chooses to see, in the monster trying to kill him, a fellow victim of the same machine, and he tries to pull him out of it. This is not weakness, and the saga is careful to show that it isn't. It's the single hardest thing Kratos has ever done, harder than killing any god, because it means overriding 3 centuries of instinct in the one situation where instinct screams loudest. The strongest thing the strongest creature in 2 mythologies ever did was decline to swing. And for a moment, Thor takes it. The broken god lowers his weapon. He chooses, finally, his daughter over his father, peace over the endless war. He decides to be better. And Odin kills him for it. The All-Father, watching his son refuse to keep killing, simply strikes Thor down himself. Murders his own child for the crime of choosing to stop. It's the purest expression of everything Odin is, a father who would rather destroy his son than allow him to become something the father can't control. The same crime Zeus committed against Kratos, the same crime the Greek gods committed against Deimos. The cycle, naked and undisguised, one last time. Odin would rather have a dead, obedient son than a living, free one. And that act, Odin killing Thor, is the moment the mask comes all the way off. For everyone, including Atreus. Because Atreus has been there, in Asgard, half believing the All-Father's lies, half convinced that maybe this old god really did care about him. And now he watches Odin murder his own son in cold blood for the sin of compassion. Whatever spell Odin had woven around the boy shatters in an instant. Atreus sees, finally and completely, exactly what Odin is, and exactly what his own father, for all his flaws and fears, is not. The final confrontation with Odin is not really a battle of strength, because Odin was never about strength. Kratos and Atreus, father and son, fully united again at last, corner the All-Father in the ruins of his own kingdom. And it is Atreus, Loki, who ends it, not with a blade, but with cunning. He traps Odin's soul, the essence of the All-Father, inside a small marble orb, the very thing Odin spent the whole saga searching for answers in. The most powerful god in the Norse world, reduced to a soul in a stone, held in the palm of the boy he tried to corrupt. And then comes a question that the entire saga has been building toward, a question that is really about Kratos' whole life. What do you do with the soul of your enemy once you hold it completely in your hand? They debate it. Atreus wants to keep the soul, to study it, maybe even to give Odin a chance to be something other than what he was. A mercy that the boy, in his hope, can't quite let go of. Kratos counsels caution, but leaves the choice, importantly, to his son. The old Kratos would have crushed it instantly, would have ground Odin into nothing the way he beat Zeus's corpse. This Kratos has learned to let others choose, even in the gravest moments. And then Sindri appears, grief-mad, hollowed out by Brock's true and final death, the gentle dwarf who lost his brother to Odin's hand. And before anyone can stop him, Sindri snatches the marble and smashes it. He destroys Odin's soul utterly, annihilates it, denies the Allfather even the bare existence of a trapped spirit. It's not justice. It's not strategy. It's the raw, broken vengeance of a being whose family was taken from him. And it's the saga showing you, one final time, what grief does when it isn't healed. Sindri gets his revenge, and it gives him nothing. He looks at the shattered marble, at the friends he blames for his loss, and he simply walks away into the ruins, alone, unable to forgive any of them. His warmth gone forever. Even in victory, the cost. Even at the end of the world, someone walks away unhealed. The saga refuses to pretend that winning the war undoes the dead. Broke is still gone. Sindri is still broken. Thor is still a corpse in the snow. The price of Ragnarok is real, and it does not get refunded. And then Asgard falls. The home of the gods, the seat of the Allfather, collapses into fire and ruin. The entire Norse divine order ending in a single catastrophic night, exactly as the prophecy promised. The age of the Aesir is over. Kratos has now, somehow, lived to see two pantheons fall around him. He has stood in the ashes of Olympus and the ashes of Asgard both. He is the last witness of two dead worlds. But this time, and this is everything, this time, the world did not end because Kratos became its destroyer. This time, he didn't drown it in his rage. This time, he fought to protect the people in it, to give them a future, to end the tyrant rather than to become one. The fire of Ragnarok burned away the old order of fearful, cruel gods, and standing in the smoke of it, for the first time in his impossibly long life, Kratos was not the thing the survivors needed to fear. He was the thing they were about to start hoping in. But before he could understand what that meant, before he could see the future that was actually waiting for him, there was still one piece of the prophecy left unresolved. The mural. The painting of Atreus, weeping over his father's dead body. The image Kratos had carried in silence since Jotunheim, certain it foretold his own death. He was about to learn that he had been reading it wrong this entire time. In the quiet after the fire, when Asgard was rubble and the survivors were counting their dead, Angrboda came to Kratos and Atreus with the last piece of the prophecy. The piece the giants had left unfinished. The piece no one had been able to read. Because here is what the murals actually were. Not fate, not fixed, inescapable destiny carved into the stone of the universe. The giants were seers, yes, but what they painted were possibilities, futures that might come to pass. And the future that Kratos had carried in dread since Jotunheim, the image of Atreus weeping over his dead body, was only one of them, one path among many, a warning, not a sentence. And there was another mural, one that had not yet been painted because its future had not yet been earned. When it was finally revealed, it did not show Kratos dead. It showed him standing, whole, surrounded by the people of the realms, mortals and survivors looking up at him not in terror, but in hope. It showed Kratos honored, revered, loved, a figure the broken world would gather around, a god worth believing in. For a man who had spent his entire existence certain that he was a curse, that everything he touched died, that the only future available to a creature like him was more ash and more graves. This image was almost impossible to comprehend. The giants had foreseen a version of Kratos that he himself had never once dared to imagine. Not the ghost of Sparta, not the destroyer of two pantheons, something new. Something he had become by choosing every single day of the Norse saga to be better than the weapon he was made into. He had changed his fate, not by fighting harder, not by killing more, but by refusing. At the burning edge of the world, with Thor at his mercy and Odin's soul in his son's hand, to become the monster one more time. He broke the cycle, and in breaking it, he unmade the prophecy of his own death. But there's a bittersweetness threaded through this revelation, because the future the giants showed was a future Kratos would have to grow into. And growing into it meant the hardest thing the entire saga had been building toward. It meant letting Atreus go. Because the boy was not a boy anymore. Atreus, Loki, had learned who he was. He understood now that there were other giants out there, survivors who had escaped the genocide, scattered across realms unknown, and that his place, his purpose, the thing he was actually meant to do, was to go and find them, to pursue his own story. A story that did not include staying safely at his father's side. And Kratos, the father who had spent 2 games terrified of losing this boy, who had hidden a prophecy of his own death rather than let his son carry the fear of it, who had held on so tightly out of a love that knew exactly how much it had to lose. Kratos had to do the one thing that love, at its truest, finally requires. He had to open his hand. He let his son leave. Think about everything that choice contained. Freya numbed her son to keep him. Zeus killed his son to control him. Odin murdered his son for daring to choose his own path. Every parent in this saga, when faced with the terror of losing a child, chose the cage, chose to hold on, chose control over love, and called it protection. And every single one of them destroyed the very thing they were trying to keep. And Kratos, the most destructive father in the history of 2 mythologies, a man whose hands had killed his own daughter, looked at his son walking toward a dangerous and uncertain future, and he let him go, freely, with love, with trust. The one parent in the entire story who learned the lesson, the one who finally understood that you cannot protect someone by imprisoning them, that the love that holds too tight is just fear wearing a kinder mask. And let's be honest about how much harder this was for Kratos than for anyone who came before him, because the saga goes out of its way to stack the deck against him. He didn't just have an ordinary parent's ordinary fear of an empty house. He had a literal prophecy of his death waiting somewhere out there in the realms his son was walking into. He had 300 years of brutal evidence that everything he lets out of his sight, everything he loves, dies. He had a mind that could conjure, in perfect detail, every catastrophe that might befall a boy alone in a broken world, because he had personally inflicted most of those catastrophes on other people's children. Every instinct, every memory, every scar on his ash-gray skin was screaming at him to hold on, to keep the boy close, to do the thing that fear had taught the entire universe to do. And he overrode all of it. He looked at the most reasonable fear any parent ever had, a fear backed by prophecy and 3 centuries of loss, and he decided that his son's freedom mattered more than his own terror. There is no harder version of this choice anywhere in either mythology, and the one being who had the most reason to refuse it is the only one who made it. That, in the end, is what separates Kratos from every god and titan and father who came before him. Not strength, he was always strong. Not power,
He had more than almost anyone. What he finally found at the edge of his home, watching his son walk away, was the specific, unglamorous courage to trust someone he loved with their own life. To believe that Atreus could carry himself, to let the story belong to the boy instead of to his father's fear. It is the smallest possible gesture and the largest thing he ever did, and it cost him more than killing 2 pantheons ever did.
Before Atreus left, there was a goodbye between them that carried the weight of everything. No grand speeches, that was never their way. But the father who had once been unable to even say his son's name, who called him only boy because he was too afraid to get any closer, had long since started calling him by his name. Atreus. And in that final embrace, you could feel the entire distance they had traveled. From 2 grieving strangers who couldn't look at each other over a dead woman's ashes, to a father and a son who had walked through the end of the world together and come out the other side as something whole. And then the boy was gone, off into the realms to find his people, to write his own legend. And Kratos stood at the edge of the home they'd shared and watched him disappear, the way fathers have always watched their children disappear into futures they won't get to follow. Not with the panic he'd carried for so long, with something quieter. Something that, in a creature like Kratos, looked almost like peace. But Kratos' own story was not finished. Because before he could fully step into the future the giants had painted, before he could become the god the people needed, he had to face the one enemy he had never been able to defeat. Not Ares, not Zeus, not Odin. Himself. His past. The ghost of Sparta. The ashes he still wore. And the place he would face it was a hall the Norse called Valhalla. Valhalla was not a place you conquered. That was the first thing it taught him. In the legends, Valhalla was the warrior's paradise, the hall where the honored dead feasted and fought forever. But the Valhalla that opened itself to Kratos was something stranger and far more dangerous. A realm that reached directly into a soul and pulled out everything buried there. That shaped itself around a being's deepest wounds and forced them to walk through. It was less a hall than a reckoning, and Kratos had more to reckon with than perhaps anyone who had ever lived. He went there for a reason he could barely admit even to himself. The realms were broken and leaderless. The survivors of Ragnarok were looking for someone to follow. The mural had shown him a future where he became a beloved god, a protector, a source of hope. And every cell in Kratos' body rebelled against the idea. Because how could he lead anyone? How could a man dressed in the ashes of his murdered family, a creature who had drowned the world in blood, who had beaten his own father to death and felt nothing, how could that thing possibly become a god worth believing in? He could not accept the future the giants painted because he could not forgive the past that built him. So Valhalla gave him his past. All of it. The realm conjured Greece around him, the sun-baked temples, the cliffs over the wine-dark sea, the places where it all happened. And it conjured the ghosts. Not literal enemies to be slain, though they came at him as enemies, but the echoes of who he had been. The Spartan, the servant of Ares, the god of war, the destroyer. Each time he thought he had fought his way through, the realm sent him back to the beginning, the way memory always sends you back to the beginning, forcing him to face the same horrors again and again, until he stopped fighting them and started understanding them. He was made to confront the temple. The night the torches burned and his blades found 2 figures in the dark. The single worst moment of an existence stuffed full of terrible moments. Valhalla would not let him look away from it, would not let him bury it under rage the way he always had. It held his face to the fire of his own deepest shame, and asked him the question he had spent 300 years and 2 pantheons running from. Can a man who did this ever be anything other than what he did? and he was not alone in there. Because the true Tyr was with him now. The real god of war, the genuine article, finally freed from his imprisonment. Nothing like the cowardly mask Odin had worn. The real Tyr was wise and weary, and carried his own enormous guilt, his own history of violence and regret. And Tyr became something Kratos had never had. A peer, a reflection. Another god of war who had walked the same blood-soaked road and was trying, like Kratos, to figure out what comes after the killing stops. The two of them moved through Valhalla together, two old weapons learning whether they could become something else. And Valhalla pushed Kratos toward a choice that the whole 190 minutes of his life had been building to, even if he never knew it. The people of the realms, the mortals, the survivors, the ones left standing in the ruins of the old gods, were calling for a leader. Not a conqueror, a protector. Someone who knew suffering well enough to shield others from it. And the question Valhalla forced on Kratos was whether he could accept that call. Whether he could lay down the identity of the ghost of Sparta, not by forgetting it, not by pretending it never happened, but by carrying it differently. By letting his past become a source of compassion instead of a sentence of shame. This is the part that matters most, so let's be precise about it. Because it's the entire meaning of the man. Kratos did not earn his peace by erasing what he'd done. The gods could never take away his nightmares, remember? No one could. Because his deeds were real, and the dead stayed dead. There is no version of this story where Kratos gets to be innocent. He killed his family. He destroyed a world. Those things are true forever. What Valhalla offered him was not absolution. It was something harder and more honest. It offered him the chance to accept himself, the whole of himself, the monster and the father, the destroyer and the protector, and to choose, with full knowledge of everything he was, to become something better anyway. He had spent his Greek life believing that strength meant never being vulnerable, that the past had to be conquered or buried or avenged. And in Valhalla, he finally learned the thing Faye had been trying to teach him all along, the thing Atreus had needed him to understand, the thing that separated him forever from Ares and Zeus and Odin. That the bravest thing a powerful being can do is not destroy. It's to forgive, including, hardest of all, to forgive yourself enough to be useful to others. And so, in the depths of Valhalla, surrounded by the ghosts of everything he had ever been, Kratos made his decision. He would accept the call. He would become a god of the realms, not a god of fear, not a god of war in the way Ares understood it or Odin understood it, but a god of war who protects rather than conquers, who shields the weak rather than feeding on them, who leads by carrying the burden rather than inflicting it. A god worthy of the hope the mural had promised. The first good god this story had ever produced, and the most unlikely candidate imaginable for the role. He emerged from Valhalla changed in a way that none of his deaths or victories had ever changed him. Not stronger, not more powerful. He had always had power. What he had now, for the first time, was peace. Not the peace he once begged the gods for, the peace of forgetting, but a deeper and more durable thing, the peace of acceptance. The peace of a man who has finally stopped running from himself and turned around to find that the thing chasing him was just a frightened person who needed forgiveness. The ash was still on his skin. It always would be. He would carry Lysandra and Calliope on his body until the day he finally died, however far away that day might be. But the ash no longer meant only guilt now. It meant memory. It meant the people he had loved and failed, carried forward by a man who had, against every law of his own history, learned how to love and not destroy. The same ashes, a different man wearing them. And so the ghost of Sparta became something the world had never seen. A god who chose mercy. A father who learned to let go. A weapon that became a man, and then became something even rarer. A protector. The destroyer of Olympus and the survivor of Asgard, standing in the ruins of two dead worlds, finally ready to help build a third. So let's step back now, all the way back, and look at the whole shape of him at once. Because a life this long only reveals its meaning when you can see both ends of it at the same time.
Start with the thing that's easy to miss because it never stops being true. Kratos cannot die.
Not really. Not the way other beings die. He has been killed and crawled back from death more than once. He has outlived everyone he ever loved and everyone who ever wronged him. He has stood at the funeral of two entire pantheons. And that all by itself is a kind of curse the gods never had to design on purpose, because it came free with everything else. To be the last one left. To remember worlds that no longer exist. To carry the names of the dead because there is no one else alive who knew them. Most of the beings in this story were terrified of death. Odin most of all, who tore reality open trying to escape it. But Kratos' torment was the opposite. For most of his life, death was the one mercy he wanted and could not have. He begged for it on a cliff in Greece. He stepped off the edge of the world and was dragged back.
The universe kept him alive, not as a gift, but as a sentence, because a being that cannot die is a being that cannot escape what it's done. Immortality for Kratos was just guilt with no expiration date. And consider what that actually means lived out across centuries. Because it's easy to say he can't die and miss the specific texture of the horror. Everyone Kratos has ever loved has an ending. Lysandra ended, Calliope ended, Deimos ended, Faye ended. The mortal soldiers who followed him, the friends he made, the enemies he respected, all of them get the thing he can't have, the period at the end of the sentence. Kratos has to keep reading the book after every other character has left it. He becomes a living graveyard, the sole remaining place where the dead still exist, because he's the only one who remembers them. There's a particular loneliness reserved for the one who outlives everything. Not the sharp grief of a single loss, but the slow, accumulating weight of being the last shelf the dust of whole worlds settles on. He carried Greece in his head long after Greece was gone. He'll carry the Norse dead the same way. To love anyone for Kratos is to sign up in advance for the certainty of burying them and going on. Which makes the choice he eventually arrives at. To love Atreus anyway. To build a family anyway. To care for the survivors of Ragnarok anyway. Almost incomprehensibly brave when you frame it correctly. He knows, better than any being who has ever existed, exactly what loving someone costs, because he has paid that cost more times and more permanently than anyone alive. And he opens his heart regardless. The immortal who learned that everything ends decides, at last, that the ending is not a reason to refuse the beginning. That may be the deepest reversal in the entire saga. Not that the weapon became a man, but that the man who had every reason to stop loving, who had been punished for love more cruelly than anyone in two mythologies, chose to keep doing it anyway. And that reframes everything about his rage, doesn't it? We tend to think of Kratos as the angriest being who ever lived, and he was. But underneath the anger was never really hatred. It was grief that had nowhere to go. Every god he killed was an attempt to fill a hole shaped exactly like his daughter. Every war he started was a way to make the noise loud enough to drown out the silence where his family used to be. The rage was the symptom. The wound was the whole story. And no amount of killing could ever cauterize it, because you cannot avenge yourself against your own hands. Which brings us to the spine of the entire thing, the pattern that runs through both his lives like a crack through stone. fathers and sons, parents and children. Over and over, in every world, the same tragedy with new faces. Look at how many times it repeats. The gods took Deimos from a mother and a brother because they feared a prophecy. Zeus killed Kratos, his own son, because he feared a prophecy. Kratos killed his own daughter, not from fear, but the result was the same: a child dead at a parent's hand. Freya numbed Balder and lost him to a hatred her own protection created. Odin murdered Thor for the crime of choosing to be a better father than Odin ever was. Sindri lost his brother and let the grief turn him to stone. Again and again and again, the people in this story are handed someone they love and a fear of losing them. And again, they choose to control rather than to trust, to cage rather than to release, and they destroy the very thing they were trying to protect. It is, in the end, the only real villain in the whole saga. Not Ares, not Zeus, not Odin. The real enemy is the lie that fear tells you about love. The lie that says if you hold tightly enough, you can keep the people you love safe forever. Every parent in this story believed that lie, and every one of them paid for it with the child they were trying to keep. And what makes the pattern so insidious is that every single one of them thought they were the exception. None of them set out to destroy their children. Zeus didn't murder Kratos out of hatred. He genuinely believed he was preventing a catastrophe, breaking a cycle, doing the hard but necessary thing. Freya didn't curse Balder out of cruelty. She was trying to save her baby from death itself. Odin tells himself, right up to the end, that everything he does is wisdom, foresight, the regrettable cost of keeping the realms in order. Each of them had a reason that sounded, from the inside, like love. That's how the cycle survives across generations and mythologies. Not because anyone chooses to be a monster, but because fear is so good at disguising itself as care. Every parent in this story looked at the same fork in the road: trust or control, the open hand or the closed fist, and talked themselves into the fist, certain that this time, in their case, for their child, the fist was the loving choice. And every time, it wasn't. The lie doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like protecting your kid. That's exactly why it's so hard to break, and exactly why it took the most damaged father in either mythology to finally break it. Every one of them, except one. Because at the very end, when Kratos stood at the edge of his home and watched his son walk away into a dangerous, unknowable future, he was the only parent in 300 years of this story who looked that fear directly in the face and chose love anyway. He opened his hand, he let go, and in doing so, he broke a pattern that had run unbroken through gods and giants and titans for longer than the realms had names. He was the curse that finally chose not to be passed on. And there's a detail buried in the Norse saga that makes this almost unbearably poignant once you understand it. Remember the world serpent, the impossibly enormous being coiled through the realms, the one that seemed to recognize Atreus, the one so old it exists across time itself? The truth Mimir pieced together is that the serpent was thrown backward through time from some future catastrophe, which means it didn't know Atreus from the past. It knew him from a future yet to come. And the giant's lore points to something staggering. That great serpent, the one that recognized the boy, is bound up with Atreus' own future. A child of Loki sent spinning back through the ages until it arrived at the beginning of the very world it came from. A descendant who became an ancestor. Time folding back on itself. Family wrapped around the spine of existence. So vast and so tangled that a father and son are connected to the architecture of the universe itself in ways neither of them could ever fully hold in their heads. It's the saga's strangest, quietest way of saying the thing it's been saying all along. That what you pass down outlives you in ways you'll never see. Kratos spent his Greek life passing down nothing but death.
And in his Norse life, the thing he passed down, the trust, the second chance, the choice to be better, would echo forward through time in shapes too enormous for any single life to witness. The cruelty he loosed on the Greek world and the love he planted in the Norse one were both kinds of inheritance. He just finally learned which one was worth leaving. But none of this, not the broken cycle, not the future the giants painted, not the God of mercy he became, none of it would have been possible without the one person we've barely talked about. The one who's dead before the story even properly begins. The one whose ashes set everything in motion. Faye. Think about how strange and beautiful her role is. She has almost no screen time. She's gone before we meet her. And yet, she is the author of Kratos' entire redemption, the secret architect of everything good that happens in 300 years of his existence. She was a giant, a seer, a being who could glimpse what was coming. She knew who Kratos was, what he'd done in Greece, the blood, the ash, all of it. And she loved him anyway. Not in spite of seeing him clearly, but because of it. She looked at the most destructive creature in the history of two mythologies and saw, underneath the monster, a man who was simply waiting for someone to believe he could be more. And she didn't just love him, she planned for him. The journey to scatter her ashes, the path through the realms, the truth waiting in Jotunheim. Faye orchestrated her family's salvation from beyond her own death, laying a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead a grieving god and a confused boy toward everything they needed to become. She named their son Atreus, after a good man, while the giants called him Loki, giving him both a destiny and a choice about it. Even her death was a kind of gift, though it didn't feel like one. It forced Kratos to finally turn toward his son, because there was no one else left to turn toward. Kratos spent his Greek life surrounded by gods who used his grief as a leash. And then he met one being, a mortal-seeming woman in the snow at the edge of the world, who used her love to set him free. The contrast is the whole point. The gods made him a weapon by exploiting his wounds. Faye made him a man by trusting his heart. And the difference between those two kinds of power, the power that controls and the power that liberates, is, when you get right down to it, the entire moral of his life. She never got to see it work. She never saw him let Atreus go. She never saw him stand in the giant's mural as a god of hope, or walk out of Valhalla at peace, or become the protector the realms needed. She planted a garden she would never see bloom and trusted that it would. That's its own kind of faith. The same faith every parent has to find. The faith that the love you put into someone will outlast you and do its work in a future you won't be there for. And here is the final irony, the one that ties the very beginning of this story to its very end. Kratos began as a man who would do anything to be free of his past. He served the gods for 10 years to have his memories erased. He climbed through death itself, chasing a peace that meant forgetting. He wanted more than power, more than vengeance, more than his own life, to simply not remember what he'd done. To be clean, to wash the ash away. And he never got it. Not once. The gods couldn't grant it. Vengeance couldn't earn it. Two dead pantheons couldn't buy it. The ash stayed on his skin through everything. But in the end, he didn't need it anymore. That's the transformation that no battle could have won for him. He stopped trying to escape his past and learned instead to carry it. He stopped needing to be clean and learned to be whole, which is a different and harder and truer thing. The memories that the gods refused to take away became finally not a punishment, but a part of him. The man who would have given anything to forget became a man strong enough to remember. And only then, only when he stopped running, did the peace he'd chased for 300 years quietly catch up to him. The ash never came off. He just stopped trying to wash it away and started letting it mean something other than shame. So what do you call a being like this when it's all over? He was a slave to the gods and the destroyer of them. He was the worst father imaginable, and somehow, in the end, one of the best. He was a weapon that learned to lay itself down. He was a man made entirely of rage who spent his final chapter teaching a boy how not to be ruled by it. He was the ghost of Sparta, the god of war, the marked warrior the gods spent generations trying to kill, and the great prophecy they feared so badly came true exactly as foretold. He did bring about the end of the gods. Twice. They were right to be afraid. They were just wrong about why. They thought he would destroy them out of evil, out of ambition, out of some inherent monstrousness. But Kratos never destroyed anything because he was a monster. He destroyed because he was wounded, and the beings who wounded him kept choosing fear over love, control over trust, the cage over the open hand. He was the consequence of their cruelty, the bill that always, eventually, comes due. Every god who fell to him fell because somewhere, generations back, someone decided that the way to keep a child was to break it. And the one god who finally understood that, who looked at his own son and chose to trust him, to free him, to love him without conditions. That god didn't bring about an ending at all. He brought about a beginning. The realms in the aftermath did not fall into the darkness that the prophecies feared. They had something the old worlds never did. They had a god who knew exactly how much suffering costs, because he had inflicted and endured more of it than any being alive. They had a protector who had been the destroyer, and who therefore understood better than any innocent ever could why the destroying had to stop. The most dangerous creature in the history of two mythologies became its gentlest guardian, and he became it not by forgetting his violence, but by remembering precisely where it leads. There's a version of this story that ends in tragedy, and for most of 300 years, that's the version it looked like it would be. The boy who couldn't save his brother, the general who murdered his family, the god who drowned a world, the father who was fated to die in his son's arms. Every sign pointed toward an ending soaked in grief. But the giants were right about one thing above all. The future was never carved in stone. It was always a possibility, waiting to be chosen. And Kratos, who had spent his whole existence believing he had no choices, that he was only ever a weapon pointed by someone else's hand, finally learned that the most powerful thing any being can do, god or mortal, is to choose differently than the people who made them. He chose. And the painting changed. And a man who began as the instrument of an ending became, against everything, the author of something new. We met him as a creature dressed in the ashes of the people he loved. We leave him still wearing them, but standing now in a living world, beside a friend with a wicked tongue strapped to his hip, and an ally who once swore to kill him, watching the smoke clear over realms that looked to him not in terror, but in hope, with a son out there somewhere writing his own legend, free because his father was finally brave enough to let him go. The ash is still there. It always will be. But for the first time in 300 years, it isn't the loudest thing about him. Kratos spent his whole life believing his story was already written. A short, brutal tale of a weapon that breaks everything it touches. The kind of story you can tell in a single grim sentence. It turned out to be something else. It turned out to be longer than any prophecy, deeper than any wound, and far harder to tell than anyone, including him, ever expected. A story that refused to stay short, that kept finding more life on the other side of every ending, until a tale that began in ash, finally, quietly, learned how to mean something more. And maybe that's the only real lesson at the bottom of all of it. That no one is only the worst thing they've ever done. That the cycle can break, even after 300 years, even in the hands of a monster, even at the very end of the world. That a story you're certain is over has a way of going long. Be better, not be sorry.
Be better. He finally was.